Chapter 290. No need. Viscount Fergus shook his head. Now that the Fergus family has just been promoted to an Earl family, there are many things in the territory that need to be taken care of. If I also disappear, the territory will become chaotic in a few days. But Grey frowned. Earl Fergus interrupted him. There's no need to say any more. This period is too important for the Fergus family. I definitely won't go into hiding. After trying to persuade Earl Fergus to no avail, Grey could only give up. In his opinion, as long as he was alive, the territory didn't matter. It didn't matter even if there were heavy losses. However, Earl Fergus clearly didn't think so. The other party valued the territory even more than his own life. In the evening, Grey released the iron-armed barbarian ape and placed it near the bedroom in the castle to be on guard. Ever since he discovered that the iron-armed barbarian ape seemed to have an extremely strong sense of smell or hearing, he had been observing which of the two abilities it had. After a day of observation, Grey discovered that the iron-armed barbarian ape should have an extremely strong sense of hearing and was extremely sensitive to sound. On the way back, Grey hadn't discovered the blood fiends, but the iron-armed barbarian ape had already discovered the blood fiends through its ears. Obviously, the other party's sense of hearing was even sharper than his, so he directly released the iron-armed barbarian ape to be on guard at night. As for the castle, Grey didn't count on the original patrolling guards. In the face of a barbarian-level existence, it was simply impossible for them to discover it unless the other party took the initiative to reveal itself. In the bedroom, the incense oil lamp emitted an orange glow. After hearing the news about Rob Tracy, Grey, who was a little restless, didn't feel like sleeping for the time being. Thus, he took out his rune space bag. After searching for a while, he found a leather book with handwritten words. This book was the Wind Wolf Sequence's Desolate Level Blood Technique that he had obtained from Sophia. For this blood technique, he was still in debt. He owed the other party 1.05 million. After obtaining this book, other than flipping through it once, Grey did not read it again. Even with his cultivation speed, it would take him at least 2 years to become a barbarian blood warrior. It was still early, so there was no need for him to be in a hurry to look at the follow-up blood technique. Now that he wasn't sleepy, he could take it out to take a look. As the pages flipped, Grey quickly skimmed through the contents of the book. As he was not in a hurry to cultivate, he read rather casually. Similar to the previous cultivation method, it was also divided into 4 cultivation methods. Each cultivation method was also divided into an external cultivation method and an internal totem. The only difference was that whether it was the cultivation style or the totem style, they were all different from the previous sequences. Moreover, they were more complicated and cumbersome. According to the leader of the Storm Mercenary Group, Marlowe Sidney, the blood technique is both a cultivation method and a method of evolution. Although it requires the assistance of the corresponding medicinal ingredients, it is enough to show that the blood technique definitely contains the mysteries of evolution. Grey carefully observed the blood technique. At a glance, it looked rather ordinary, as if it was just a casual pose. However, upon closer inspection, it had a special charm, as if it coincided with some kind of rhythm, giving people a profound feeling. In this world, rune patterns can trigger special effects. When they mix with each other, it can cause changes similar to chemical reactions, just like substances in my previous world. Could it be that the blood technique is also a type of rune pattern, or something similar to rune pattern? Although he had already cultivated to the blood berserk warrior, Grey was still extremely puzzled. Why did the blood technique have the effect of promoting the growth of one's strength? What was the reason for it to promote the growth of one's strength? Did it coincide with some kind of law in this world? For example, the various laws of physics and chemistry in his previous world. Perhaps in this world, the rune laws were equivalent to the laws of physics and chemistry in his previous world. After thinking for a moment, Grey could not think of a reason, so he continued to read. It actually requires the blood technique to reach the desolate level after 3 rounds. Seeing an explanation in the book, Grey's face revealed a trace of surprise. According to the book, the symbol of reaching the desolate level was to be able to cultivate the blood technique 3 times in a row, which was the 3 rounds of the blood technique. Compared to the murderous level to the berserk level, and the berserk level to the berserk level, there's an extra round. Is the difference between the berserk level and the berserk level far greater than the difference between the murderous level and the berserk level, or the berserk level and the berserk level? According to Gray's previous cultivation experience, with each round of the blood technique cultivation, one's strength would increase by leaps and bounds. From the berserk level to the desolate level, one would need 3 rounds of the blood technique. Excluding the first round that could be completed when one first started cultivating, one would need 2 more rounds to advance from the berserk level to the desolate level. In other words, during this process, one's strength would increase by leaps and bounds twice. There is no doubt that the increase in strength would be greater than going from the murderous level to the berserk level, and from the berserk level to the berserk level. As expected, the further one cultivates, the greater the gap between the levels. From the murderous level to the berserk level, and from the berserk level to the berserk level, only 2 rounds of the blood technique were needed. However, to advance from the berserk level to the desolate level, 3 rounds of the blood technique were needed. This undoubtedly proved this point. It seemed that the berserk level was a dividing line. Before the berserk level, although the gap between adjacent levels was huge, it was not huge. However, after the berserk level, the gap between adjacent levels would rapidly increase. If he guessed correctly, the gap between the desolate level and the king level was probably larger than the gap between the berserk level and the desolate level. However, he did not know how many rounds of the blood technique would be needed to advance from the desolate level to the king level. At this moment, Gray could not help but think of what the green-haired young man had said. From the king level to the king level, one would need to undergo 4 rounds of evolution. 4 rounds of evolution, 4 rounds of substantial increase in strength. It was very similar to the substantial increase in strength between each round of the blood technique. He could not help but suspect that each round of evolution for the king level was actually the next round of cultivation for the blood technique. From the berserk level to the desolate level, one would need 3 rounds of the blood technique. From the king level to the king level, one would need 5 rounds of the blood technique. Based on this calculation, from the desolate level to the king level, one would need 4 rounds of the blood technique. Of course, this was only Gray's guess. He did not have the corresponding blood technique, so he could not determine whether this was the case. He could only determine if his guess was correct when he obtained the corresponding blood technique in the future. Very quickly, Gray finished flipping through the entire book and finally felt a little sleepy. He put the blood technique book into his rune space bag and prepared to blow out the light and sleep. Boom! Suddenly, a loud sound rang out in the silent night. It was like thunder in the night, extremely loud and ear-piercing. Not good. Gray, who had just felt a little sleepy, was now wide awake. He jumped out of bed, grabbed the sword beside the bed, and opened the door in his pajamas. He was all too familiar with this kind of movement. It was the sound of fight. If he guessed correctly, the Iron Arm Barbarian ape must be fighting with some kind of existence. Moreover, the existence fighting with it was definitely not weak. It was very likely that it was also at the barbarian level. Otherwise, there would not be such a sound. In the next room, Earl Fergus, who had moved to the next room for convenience, also opened the door. He looked at Gray with a grave expression and asked, "This kind of movement, is the Iron Arm Barbarian ape fighting with someone? It can't be wrong. Moreover, the one fighting with it should be a barbarian blood warrior." Gray nodded with a deep voice. "Barbarian blood warrior?" Earl Fergus's expression changed. "Is it Rob Tracy? It could only be the other party that had the strength of a barbarian blood warrior and would attack Fergus Castle. I'm not sure yet. I'll go take a look." "Father, you go hide in the basement for a while," Gray said with a grave expression. "Okay, be careful." Earl Fergus did not refuse and nodded in agreement. If the attacker was a barbarian blood warrior, he would participate in the battle without hesitation. However, if it was a barbarian blood warrior with his combat strength, he would not be of any help at all. On the contrary, he might even hinder Gray. "Earl, young Master Gray." Some of the servants in the castle surrounded Earl Fergus and Gray. "Everyone go to the basement," Gray ordered, and quickly went to the place where the sound came from. There was nothing to be afraid of. The current him already had the strength to contend with Rob Tracy. Moreover, the Sydney region was sealed. The other party might not be able to transport the barbarian-level blood fiends in. After all, according to Sophia, a huge rune space bag like the one in his hand was very rare. Boom, boom. The huge sound of the battle was still coming from that direction. It was like thunder after thunder. The two parties fighting were undoubtedly at the barbarian level. Whoosh! Gray quickly approached the place where the battle was taking place and saw the two parties confronting each other. One of them was at least 7 meters tall. His body was huge and burly, and his arms were as thick as water tanks. The other party was dressed in black. His face could not be seen clearly, but he was able to attack and defend against the iron-armed barbarian ape. There was no doubt that he was at the barbarian level. There were no castle guard around. They had already been ordered to quickly hide if there was a fight. After all, with their combat strength, they would not be of any help in a battle of such a level. Although the light was dim, with Gray's night vision, he could clearly see the silhouette of the person fighting the iron-armed barbarian ape. The other party was wearing a black cloak that covered his head, and his face could not be seen clearly. He was of medium build and held a two-handed sword. Seeing the other party's weapon, Gray could not help but be slightly stunned. A two-handed sword? Isn't Rob Tracy's weapon a dagger? It's not him. He had fought with Rob Tracy before, so he naturally knew Rob Tracy's weapons. They were two short sabers, one in each hand. However, the barbaric blood warrior that was attacking him was actually holding a two-handed sword. It was obvious that they were not the same person. Could it be an expert from the Wallen family? He quickly thought of the Wallen family that was related to Rob Tracy and said coldly, "Who is it? Remember the website address so that you can read it next time, or enter XS52 to enter the website." Chapter 291. It's me. Hearing Gray's question, the person fighting with the iron arm ape took a few steps back, took off the cloak on his head, and revealed his face. His voice sounded old. It was an old man with many wrinkles on his face and sparse hair on his head. Seeing this person, Gray's face couldn't help but be shocked as he exclaimed in surprise, "Lord Mantle." This person was none other than Marquis Sidney's uncle, Mantle Sidney, who had the strength of a barbarian blood warrior. He really did not expect that the other party would appear here, in the Fergus family's living room. "Lord Mantle, I'm sorry. I didn't expect it to be you." Gray and Earl Fergus both apologized. "It's fine." Mantle Sidney shook his head slightly. "In the end, it's because I didn't inform you in advance." "Lord Mantle, why are you here?" And at this time, with an apologetic look and slight hesitation, Earl Fergus asked. "It's a long story." Mantle Sidney smiled bitterly and shook his head. "The Marquis guessed that Rob Tracy is likely to attack the Fergus family, so he sent me here. In order to prevent the news from being leaked, he did not inform you in advance in the letter. This time, I was going to sneak in and contact you, but I didn't expect." Speaking of this, Mantle Sidney asked in confusion, "What's the matter with that barbarian blood beast?" "That barbarian blood beast was controlled by a magic weapon." Gray said, "Controlled by a magic weapon?" Mantle Sidney was slightly surprised. "Isn't the limit of your magic weapon 4 mad blood beasts?" At first, we thought that was the case. However, after seeing how Rob Tracy's magic weapon was able to control the barbaric-level blood fiends, we guessed that our magic weapon should be able to control the barbaric-level blood fiends as well. Earl Fergus explained. "So we hired a mercenary group to kill a barbarian blood beast and try to control it. In the end, we really could control barbarian blood beasts, although only one." "I see." Mantle Sidney was enlightened. He did not doubt Earl Fergus's words. If Rob Tracy's magic weapon could control the barbaric-level blood fiends, then his own magic weapon might be able to control the barbaric-level blood fiends as well. It was a reasonable explanation. "I didn't expect your magical weapons to have such an effect. This is a good thing. With the strength of this barbaric-level blood fiend and myself, if Rob Tracy dares to come here, he will definitely not be able to return alive. Sir Monair, you must be tired. I have arranged a place for you to stay." "All right." In the following days, Marnell Sidney quietly stayed in Fergus Castle. Apart from Grey, Earl Fergus, and a few servants, most of the people in the castle were unaware of his existence. For more than 10 days, the expected assassination did not come. Just as Grey, Earl Fergus, and Marnell Sidney were feeling strange, a piece of news reached the Fergus family. What? The Smalley family was attacked. Marnell Sidney was shocked. This was completely out of their expectations. According to their guesses, Rob Tracy's first target was likely to be the Fergus family, so he hid in Fergus Castle. They did not expect that the other party's first target would be the Smalley family. Logically speaking, the other party should not have much enmity with the Smalley family. "Father, what's the situation with the Smalley family?" Grey asked. He was happy to see the Smalley family being assassinated. After all, the relationship between the Fergus family and the Smalley family could be said to be extremely bad. "We lost a lot of people, but those who died were all collateral descendants. A group of direct descendants, including Count Smalley, had already gone into hiding before this. Fortunately, although he felt a little regretful that the direct descendants of the Smalley family were not killed in this assassination, Marnell Sidney was present at this time, so naturally, he could not show it. He actually chose the Smalley family as the target. Marnell Sidney furrowed his brows. The other party was either shocked by the commotion that night, or he guessed our plan. Indeed, Earl Fergus was solemn. With Rob Tracy's hatred for the Fergus family, he did not seek revenge on the Fergus family first. It must be because he sensed something. "Before Rob Tracy attacked the Smalley family, did you find any traces of the other party?" Grey asked. "No. According to the news, before this, not a single trace could be found." Earl Fergus shook his head. "This is difficult." Grey's expression was slightly serious. The facts prove that the investigators sent by the Sidney family were indeed unable to find any traces of the other party, as they had guessed. The other party was completely untouchable in the Sidney Hill. This was the worst situation possible. Marnell Sidney frowned. "We must find a way to find Rob Tracy. But with the other party's strength and assassination methods, even if we know that he has entered the Sidney Hill, it will be difficult to find him." Earl Fergus frowned as well. "It's a pity that the blood arts practiced by the families of the Sidney Hill are not good at tracking. If only someone practiced a blood art that was good at tracking." 2 days later, there was more news. Earl Ford's family was also attacked. The direct descendants were not killed because they had already gone into hiding, but many of the collateral relatives and even the guards in the castle died. Some of the valuables in the secret room were also taken away. 3 days later, there was more news. The Bismay family was attacked, and the Bismay castle was destroyed. Other than the direct descendants of the Bismay family, who had already gone into hiding, no one in the castle escaped. A few days later, there was more news of the other noble families being attacked. The families were attacked one after another, and the entire Sidney Hill fell into panic. Taking advantage of the fact that the nobles were hiding and did not dare to show their faces, groups of bandits took the opportunity to rob, and the entire Sidney Hill fell into chaos. "Damn it!" Marnell Sidney slammed the table, his eyes full of anger. He had the strength, but he did not know where to start. After all, he did not even know where the other party was or which family they were planning to attack. Grey and Earl Fergus looked at each other, both frowning. With the other party's ability to blend into the shadows, it was too difficult to find him. Moreover, the other party should have a rune portal bag. If he hid somewhere, he would not need to resupply for months, which was even more difficult. "Lord Marnell, among the families that are close to the Sidney Hill family, are there any that practice a special blood art that is good at tracking?" Grey asked. With their current methods, it was impossible to find Rob Tracy, so they could only hope that someone who practiced a blood art like tracking could help. Marnell Sidney shook his head. "No, among the families that are close to the Sidney family, there are no families that practice a blood art like tracking. If there were, the Sidney family would have asked them for help a long time ago, and the entire Sidney territory would not be in chaos now. Then we can only ask a mercenary group. I heard that some mercenary groups are very good at tracking. We can ask those mercenary groups to track the other party." Grey said, "Do you know any mercenary groups that are good tracking?" Mantle Sidney looked at Gray in surprise. I don't know either. Gray shook his head. He did not know much about the mercenary groups either. However, the Fergus family has taken in a mercenary group that moved from Mercenary City. We can ask them to come over and see if they know. A mercenary group that moved from Mercenary City? Very well. Invite them over and ask. Soon, a man and a woman were led into the Fergus family's living room. It was the Red Wing leader, Hobbs, and Alice. Young Master Gray, Lord Earl. The two of them bowed to Gray and Earl Fergus. In the process, the two of them looked strangely at the other person in the living room. This is Lord Mantle from the Sidney family. Earl Fergus introduced. Greetings, Lord Mantle. The two of them were shocked and hurriedly bowed. The Sidney Marquis family was one of the top families in the Marquis family, and they were also the Fergus family's immediate superior. They naturally knew that they had moved to Fergus City. Have a seat. I invited you over this time because I have something to ask you. Gray gestured for the two of them to sit down and said, Young Master Gray, what is it? Hobbs asked, Does the Red Wing know any mercenary groups that are good at tracking? Or do you know any mercenary groups that are good at tracking? Good at tracking. Hobbs thought for a moment and shook his head. I'm sorry, young Master Gray. Among the mercenary groups I know, there is no such mercenary group. Alice raised her beautiful eyebrows slightly and said with a look of reminiscence in her eyes, Young Master Gray, I don't know a mercenary group that is good at tracking. What mercenary group is it? Before Gray could ask, Mantle Sidney asked anxiously. Hellhound mercenaries. I once heard from the old leader that the people in this mercenary group practice blood spells that are good at tracking. Blood spells that are good at tracking. Mantle Sidney's eyes suddenly lit up and asked anxiously, Do you know where this mercenary group is? This mercenary group is located in Stellaris City in the west of the kingdom. It's about a dozen days' journey from the Sidney territory. Alice replied. After some discussion, it was finally decided that the Sidney family would entrust the Red Wing to hire the Hellhound mercenaries. As a member of the Marquis family, the Sidney family naturally offered a high price. Hobbs and Alice were very excited when they offered such a high price. A commission mission with almost no difficulty could actually get such a high reward. On the same day, the two of them were ready. They took some mercenaries and set off for Stellaris City. Remember the website of this website. It's convenient for you to read it next time. XS52 to enter this website. Chapter 292. Although the Red Wing had already gone to hire Hellhound mercenaries for the Sidney family, it would take about a month to complete the round trip. In the following days, there were still attacks on the nobles in Sidney Hill. There were still casualties, and panic was still spreading. The entire Sidney Hill was in chaos. Just when Gray and the others thought that they had to wait for the Hellhound mercenaries to find Rob Tracy, an unexpected piece of news came. What? Rob Tracy was found. Mantle Sidney looked at Earl Fergus in surprise. Gray also looked at Earl Fergus in surprise. Yes, that's what the news said. Earl Fergus nodded as he received the urgent news from the messenger bird. What did it say? Mantle Sidney asked. Looking at the mess in Sidney Hill, he was very anxious. He no longer had any hope for Sidney Hill's tracking ability, which was why he hired the Hellhound mercenaries. He didn't expect that Rob Tracy's news would come before the Hellhound mercenaries arrived. They said that they found a suspicious caravan. Suspicious caravan? Yes, this caravan is secretly transporting a batch of goods. The goods in this batch of goods are very large. Judging from the size, it's very likely to be the corpse of a barbarian-level blood fiend. Earl Fergus nodded and said, A barbarian-level blood fiend? Is it for Rob Tracy's magical weapon? Gray's eyes suddenly flashed with a sharp light. According to Sophia, a space as large as the rune portal bag in his hand was very rare. Rob Tracy might not have it. Therefore, if the other party wanted to transport the corpse of a barbarian-level blood fiend into Sidney Hill, it was very likely that they had to transport it through a caravan. Where is this caravan now? Mantle Sidney asked. This caravan should be in the territory of Silver Pine City. I haven't attracted the attention of the caravan yet, right? No. According to the news, they're currently sending people to secretly monitor this caravan. The other party should not know that they are being monitored. Earl Fergus shook his head. Do you know the specific direction of this caravan? Manel Sidney continued asking. It's heading northeast. We can't determine its exact destination yet. Northeast? Manel Sidney pondered, then his expression suddenly changed. Not good. They're heading for Stormwind Hills. Stormwind Hills, Sir Monair. Is there anything special about this place? Gray looked at Marnell Sidney in puzzlement. Gray knew about the Stormwind Hills. It was a barren, hilly terrain that wasn't suitable for farming. It wasn't in theft and belonged to the Sidney family. Marnell Sidney's expression changed when he guessed that the other party might be heading for Stormwind Hills. It was obvious that this place was unusual for the Sidney family. Now that it's come to this, there's no harm in telling you. Manel Sidney hesitated for a moment, but he finally spoke. There's a magic crystal mine there. Magic crystal mine? Gray and Earl Fergus couldn't help but be surprised. Magic crystal, a crystal that contained magic power. Not only could it be used to make magic coins, one was worth 100 gold coins, but it could also be used in many other ways. Its value could be imagined. The Sidney family actually owned one. It could be imagined how much wealth it brought to the Sidney family every year. They must be going for the magic crystal mine. Marnell Sidney's face was gloomy. The magic crystal mine was an important pillar of the Sidney family. The other party actually had this idea, which made him extremely angry. Sir Monair, how is the protection there? It's guarded by an elder of the barbarian blood warrior. A barbarian blood warrior. Gray was slightly surprised. Including Marnell Sidney and Marnell Sidney. The Sidney family had at least 3 barbarian blood warriors. The Sidney family's background was really strong. It was worthy of being one of the top families in the Marquis family. There was even a rumor that if the 3 Duke families hadn't appeared before the Sidney family might have become a Duke family. It was unknown whether this rumor was true or not. Marnell Sidney had a worried look. I need to rush over to support as soon as possible. Not long after, Marnell Sidney quietly left Fergus Castle. In the castle's living room, Earl Fergus and Gray were still sitting there. Father, I feel that there's a problem here. I keep feeling that it's intentional for the Sidney family to find out. Gray looked at Earl Fergus and said, when he heard that Rob Tracy's goal was the magic crystal mine, Gray already felt that there was something wrong, but he didn't say anything. After all, it involved the magic crystal mine, which was a very important matter. If his opinion affected Marnell Sidney's judgment and led to an accident at the magic crystal mine, the Fergus family wouldn't be able to take responsibility for it. I also feel that it's a bit strange. It's like deliberately attracting the experts of the Sidney family to that place. Earl Fergus nodded. He had the same worries as Gray, so he didn't point it out. Be careful in the next period of time. Understood. On the lonely gravel road, a caravan slowly moved forward. The caravan was quite large, with more than 10 carriages. The most eye-catching one was a giant carriage covered by cloth. This carriage was clearly specially made. It was twice as long and wide as other carriages, and there were 3 horses pulling the carriage. The thing being pulled should be quite heavy. Even with 3 horses pulling it, one could still feel the strain. Sir Marnell, how is it? Did you find anything unusual? Marnell Sidney rushed here and met up with a group of people secretly monitored by the Sidney family. Sir Marnell, this caravan has been moving northeast. Other than never entering the town and having people buy supplies directly in the town, we didn't find anything unusual. A dark-skinned man respectfully replied to Marnell. Then Marnell Sidney personally monitored the caravan. Sure enough, the caravan's destination was the Stormwind Hills. 2 days passed, and the caravan was getting closer and closer to the Stormwind Hills. Marnell Sidney informed the barbarian blood warriors stationed near the magic crystal mine to meet up with him. As soon as the other side appeared, they would be killed with lightning speed. When the caravan was only a few miles away from the magic crystal mine, the caravan stopped. They removed the canvas covering the giant carriage, revealing the existence inside the giant carriage. It was a giant blood beast that was 6 meters long and covered in purple scales. On its head, there were 2 giant horns, just like the branches of a giant tree. It's a barbarian blood beast, amethyst deer. The person who joined Marnell Sidney was an old man with wrinkled skin. His name was Mantle Sidney, and he was slightly older than Mantle Sidney. Seeing the blood beast that was revealed after the canvas was removed, a trace of cold light appeared in his eyes. If you didn't come to help this time, with the help of this barbarian blood beast, I'm afraid I would have died in the hands of Rob Tracy. The caravan has turned around and retreated. Should we secretly stop them? A Sidney family guard asked for instructions. Don't worry about them. If we alarm Rob Tracy because of chasing them, the loss outweighs the gain. Marnell Sidney shook his head. More than 10 people stared at the giant carriage and the giant corpse of the barbarian blood beast in the carriage. Time passed slowly, and soon a few hours had passed. The sky was getting dark, but they didn't see Rob Tracy. No, there's a problem. Let's go and take a look. Marnell Sidney and Marnell Sidney looked at each other and faintly sensed that something was wrong. Finally, more than 10 people walked out of the dense forest and came to the giant carriage. We've been fooled. This barbarian blood beast can't be controlled at all. Marnell Sidney used his powerful strength to overturn the carriage and flip the corpse of the barbarian blood beast out of the carriage. There was a huge hole in the head of this barbarian blood beast. After communicating with Gray and Earl Fergus, he already knew that the brain of a barbarian blood beast that was controlled must be intact. But this barbarian blood beast had a hole in its head, and its brain tissue had been destroyed. Obviously, it could no longer be controlled. You mean to say that they deliberately led us here? Marnell Sidney's expression changed. Yes, they deliberately did this to attract our attention. Oh no, Rob Tracy's target is the Fergus family. Marnell Sidney suddenly understood everything. Rob Tracy must have known that you're hiding in the Fergus family. That's why he created this thing to lure you out of the Fergus family. Marnell Sidney was shocked, but he also reacted. Fortunately, the Fergus family's magic weapon can control barbarian blood beasts. They won't necessarily lose to Rob Tracy. Marnell Sidney's expression turned ugly. He had actually been fooled. Night, Fergus Castle. It was almost spring, and the weather was gradually getting warmer. Some deciduous trees had begun to grow tender leaves. Occasionally, the sound of insects could be heard in the castle. Boom! In the middle of the night, a loud noise suddenly sounded in Fergus Castle, accompanied by a violent vibration. In the Fergus family's castle, the iron-armed barbarian ape fiercely punched the ground. The ground collapsed and cracks spread in all directions. A huge, deep pit appeared. Not far from the deep pit, an old man in black with a cold expression stared coldly at the iron-armed barbarian ape in front of him. There really is a barbarian blood beast. It seems that the Fergus family's magic weapon is not inferior to mine. Chapter 293. Rob Tracy. Whoosh. Gray, dressed in battle armor, rushed over and appeared not far behind the iron-armed barbarian ape. When he saw the black-clothed Rob Tracy, his face revealed an expression of expectation as well as a trace of caution. When Marnell Sidney was lured away by the corpse of the barbarian-level blood fiend, Gray and Earl Fergus had a bad premonition. For the past few days, even when they slept in battle armor. And now, their premonition had come true. The corpse of the barbarian-level blood fiend found in the Sidney territory must have been deliberately exposed by the other party to lure Marnell Sidney away. A mere Viscount family. No, it should be an Earl family now. How lucky they are to have a magic weapon of this level. Rob Tracy's gaze did not look at Gray, but at the iron-armed barbarian ape. Compared to Gray, he was more interested in controlling the magic weapon of the iron-armed barbarian ape. After a moment, his gaze moved away from the iron-armed barbarian ape and looked coldly at Gray, who was behind the iron-armed barbarian ape. Gray Fergus, we meet again. His hatred for Gray Fergus and the Fergus family was no less than that of the Sidney family. A berserk assassin and several murderous assassins were all killed by the Fergus family. During the siege of the Sidney family, if it had not been delayed by the young man in front of him, the Sidney family might not have won in the end. Therefore, his hatred for the young man in front of him and the Fergus family was no less than that of the Sidney family. You actually didn't escape. This time, Marnell Sidney is not here. Let's see who can save you. His eyes were filled with murderous intent as he stared at Gray like a venomous snake. He completely regarded Gray as a fish on the chopping board. Rob Tracy, do you really think you could defeat the Fergus family? Gray's expression did not change as he spoke under the other's sinister gaze. Interesting, you're actually so calm. It seems that the barbarian blood fiend in front of you has given you the confidence to fight against me. Seeing that there was no fear on Gray's face, Rob Tracy chuckled, a look of disdain appearing on his face. You think you can contend against me just like that? Naive. The contempt on his face deepened. We won't know until we try. Gray snorted and looked at him coldly. The current him was no longer the same as the last time they met. The iron-armed barbarian ape by his side was a barbarian-level blood fiend. The power of his blood fiend's icy windblade had also reached the barbarian level. You're overestimating yourself. If Marnell Sidney hadn't saved you back then, do you think you'd still be alive? That's fine. I'll kill you today, and then I'll exterminate your Fergus family. The killing intent in his eyes was chilling. Rob Tracy gently stomped his feet, as if he was shaking off the dust on his feet. Swish, swish, swish. A large number of shadow tentacles appeared under his feet and uniformly attacked Gray, who was behind the iron-armed barbarian ape. Boom! Gray controlled the iron-armed barbarian ape to meet the tentacles head-on. It took a few steps forward and closed the distance between it and Rob Tracy. Its fist, which was as thick as a water tank, carried a mighty aura as it domineeringly punched down, enveloping Rob Tracy under its fist. Feeling the strength of the iron-armed barbarian ape's punch, Rob Tracy retreated and manipulated the shadow tentacles to change their target and attack the iron-armed barbarian ape. Bang, bang. The iron-armed barbarian ape swept its two gigantic arms across and shattered all the shadow tentacles that came into contact with it. It then stepped forward and chased after Rob Tracy. Oomph! Rob Tracy snorted coldly. A large number of shadow tentacles appeared under his body again. They didn't attack the iron-armed barbarian ape immediately. Instead, they intertwined with each other like ropes and transformed into a gigantic tentacle that was slightly larger than a millstone. It whistled as it whipped towards the iron-armed barbarian ape. The iron-armed barbarian ape smashed out its fist and hammered forward. Boom! With a loud sound, more than half of the gigantic tentacle festered, and the iron-armed barbarian ape's gigantic body was knocked back a few steps. It was obvious that the combined force of the several hundred shadow tentacles was extremely powerful. Whoosh! The half-festered shadow tentacle once again whipped towards the iron-armed barbarian ape, but the iron-armed barbarian ape's other gigantic hand hammered out. Boom! The shadow tentacle finally shattered completely, turning into ashes and disappearing. The iron-armed barbarian ape chased after it and hammered its fist towards Rob Tracy. It was like a gigantic meteorite crashing down. An earthy yellow radiance blossomed from Rob Tracy's daggers. The two daggers simultaneously chopped towards the fist. Clang, clang. Sparks flew in all directions. Rob Tracy was hit by the gigantic force and retreated rapidly. What a strong defense! After retreating, he looked at the iron-armed barbarian ape's fist and couldn't help but reveal a trace of surprise on his face. With his night vision, he could clearly see that the area on the iron-armed barbarian ape's fist that was hit by his daggers was intact. There wasn't even the slightest trace of scratch. What kind of blood fiend is this? Its defense is actually comparable to the silver-armored rhinoceros? He was slightly surprised. As an assassin, he dealt more with humans than blood fiends. Therefore, his understanding of blood fiends was very limited. Gray didn't answer. He commanded the iron-armed barbarian ape to chase after the iron-armed barbarian ape. The silver-armored rhinoceros was a blood fiend in the iron-armed barbarian rhinoceros sequence. It was known for its powerful defense. Blood fiends in this sequence had top-notch defense among those in the same realm. However, the iron-armed barbarian ape's arm defense was superior to the silver-armored rhinoceros by several grades. Swish, 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 swish. Shadow tentacles appeared under Rob Tracy's body and intertwined with each other. In the end, they transformed into four shadows that were as thick as buckets. Like giant pythons, They coiled around the iron-armed barbarian ape's legs and arms, binding the iron-armed barbarian ape. Rob Tracy had rich combat experience. Sensing the iron-armed barbarian ape's powerful defense, he decided to temporarily bind it. After all, it was only a corpse controlled by a magic weapon. As long as the person controlling the magic weapon was killed, the corpse would naturally lose its ability to move. However, he had obviously underestimated the iron-armed barbarian ape's strength. Crack! Before it could pounce on Gray, the iron-armed barbarian ape, which was bound by the four shadow tentacles, began to struggle violently. As it struggled, the four shadow tentacles binding the iron-armed barbarian ape quickly showed signs of cracking. In the end, they were all broken by the iron-armed barbarian ape. The iron-armed barbarian ape's strength could be ranked among the top among the barbarian-level blood fiends. Naturally, it was extremely powerful. Rob Tracy's expression changed slightly. All of the shadow tentacles turned into one and attacked the iron-armed barbarian ape with all their might. Boom! Half of the shadow tentacles collapsed, and the iron-armed barbarian ape was knocked back slightly. After retreating a few steps, it charged forward again. The shadow tentacles attacked the iron-armed barbarian ape again. Boom, boom, boom. The iron-armed barbarian ape and Robert Tracy exchanged blows rapidly. In the castle, one building after another collapsed. The violent movements were like thunder. The sound traveled extremely far, and even Fergus City, which was far away, could hear it. This must be a flesh-type, barbarian-level blood fiend. Rob Tracy's expression was gloomy. He actually felt slightly strained when facing the barbarian-level blood fiend in front of him. The blood technique that he cultivated was good at assassination and frontal confrontation. It was extremely ordinary among blood fiends of the same level. However, no matter how ordinary it was still a barbarian blood warrior. The barbarian-level blood fiend in front of him actually made him feel slightly strained just by relying on its physical body. The answer was very obvious. The barbarian-level blood fiend in front of him was definitely a flesh-type blood fiend. Even though it was just a corpse, its combat power was not inferior to that of an ordinary barbarian blood warrior. Bang! Under Gray's command, the iron-armed barbarian ape suddenly took a step to the side. Then it put its arms together like a hammer and suddenly smashed the giant shadow tentacle. The shadow tentacle was immediately smashed to the side and hit a house, causing it to collapse with a loud bang. Boom! The iron-armed barbarian ape closed in on Rob Tracy and smashed its fist down like a giant meteorite. The air vibrated violently, and the strong wind caused by the collision sent many stone fragments flying. Not good. The attack was too sudden. Rob Tracy only had time to block it with his two sabers in front of his chest. Boom! There was a violent collision. His hands were numb, and he was sent flying backward. He crashed into a pillar beside him and broke it. Rob Tracy felt a sharp pain in his back. His face twitched slightly, but he steadied himself. Thump, thump, thump. At this moment, the iron-armed barbarian ape had already caught up with him and smashed its giant fist down. A giant shadow tentacle appeared and collided with the iron-armed barbarian ape's fist. Meanwhile, the iron-armed barbarian ape quickly retreated. Good move. Rob Tracy's remaining teeth were clenched together. His gaze was cold. He was careless and actually suffered a little under the control of the other party's blood fiend. He was furious, but at the same time, he couldn't help but feel a trace of fear. The iron-armed barbarian ape was a barbarian-level blood fiend with a physical body. Its combat power was not weaker than a barbarian-level blood fiend. Under the control of the other party, its combat power might be even stronger than when it was alive. After all, humans were more intelligent than blood fiends that relied on instincts to fight. They knew how to best utilize their combat power. How's the combat power of my iron-armed barbarian ape? Behind the iron-armed barbarian ape, Gray looked at Rob Tracy with a slightly mocking expression. You're quite lucky to find such a physical body-type blood fiend. You must have paid a high price, right? Faced with Gray's mocking expression, Rob Tracy didn't fly into a rage. Instead, he sneered. Don't worry, I won't destroy such a special barbarian-level blood fiend. I'll take it with me. He calmly took out a rune space bag. The pattern and number of patterns on it were actually very similar to the one in Gray's hands. Thump! With a heavy sound, another giant creature appeared in the damaged Fergus castle. It was a humanoid, bear-type blood fiend that stood upright. It was 7 meters tall and covered with gray fur. Its fur was extremely long, and in some places it was even a foot long. Its limbs were as thick as a water bucket. Its claws were long and gleaming with a black light. They looked extremely sharp. Without a doubt, this was a barbarian-level blood fiend. Chapter 294. I was planning to save it to deal with Marnell Sidney, but I didn't expect to use it on your Fergus family first. Rob Tracy sneered as he stood behind the giant bear-shaped blood fiend. This bear-shaped blood fiend was no weaker than an ordinary barbarian blood warrior. He had asked the Wallen family to hunt it for him. He really has a large spatial rune portal bag. Gray's expression turned grave. Although he had guessed this, he was still shocked when he saw Rob Tracy take out a barbarian-level blood fiend from his spatial rune portal bag. His opponent really had a large spatial rune portal bag and could carry a barbarian-level blood fiend with him. Thump, thump, thump. The gigantic bear-shaped blood fiend was bloated and tall, like a small mountain. It pounced toward Gray. The sharp claws on its gigantic bear paws were at least a foot long, like a gigantic millstone smashing toward Gray. Gray ordered the iron-armed barbarian ape to meet the attack. Its huge iron fist, which was as thick as a water tank, collided with the bear's paws. The fists and palms of the two behemoths collided. Boom! It was like a muffled thunderclap, but also like the beating of a giant drum. Strong winds raged. Sand and stones flew everywhere, and large cracks appeared on the ground. After the collision, both of them couldn't help but take a few steps back. Both blood fiends specialized in strength, so they were equally matched in the collision of strength. Boom, boom, boom. After taking a few steps back, the two giant blood fiends charged at each other again. Their fists and palms collided continuously, producing terrifying sounds. They were evenly matched. No, that wasn't the case. After the continuous collisions, the bear-shaped blood fiend's paws were already lacerated. On the other hand, the iron-armed barbarian ape's iron arms were still intact. Among blood fiends of the same level, no blood fiend could injure his iron arms. What a good blood fiend! Seeing that the bear-shaped blood fiend was at a disadvantage, Rob Tracy's eyes flashed coldly. He sneered as he looked at Gray, who was behind the iron-armed barbarian ape. The more valiant the iron-armed barbarian ape was, the happier he was. In his opinion, this blood fiend would soon be his. He didn't need to defeat the iron-armed barbarian ape. He only needed to kill the person controlling it. Chi, chi, chi. A large number of shadow tentacles appeared. They circled around the fighting between the iron-armed barbarian ape and the bear-shaped blood fiend and headed straight for Gray. Every single one of them was extremely sharp, like a black javelin. Despite being targeted by the shadow tentacles, Gray remained. Last time, barbarian ape, with the barbarian ape, with barbarian ape. In the end, if Marnell Sidney hadn't saved him, he might have died. Barbarian, with his's with S. TSS in front of him, long icy wind blades appeared one after another. They were like huge emerald stones that were polished, whistling as they shot out. Tita like a knife cutting through butter. A large number of shadow tentacles were cut off by the wind blades and frozen by the ice. With just 5 ice wind blades, all of the shadow tentacles attacking him were cut off and frozen. As expected, it can be easily severed now. Gray nodded in satisfaction. The current icy wind blade had undergone a transformation due to the fusion of the wind and ice special abilities. Its sharpness had increased tremendously, and it was much sharper than before. It had increased by more than a level. The shadow tentacles, which were originally quite difficult to cut off, were now extremely easy. Seeing all the shadow tentacles cut off and frozen, Rob Tracy wasn't surprised. Instead, the sneer on his face deepened. Forcefully strengthening the blood fiends without regard to the loss of blood power? Let's see how long you can last. A large number of shadow tentacles reappeared and then intertwined together, turning into 5 huge tentacles that attacked Gray from 5 directions. The air was pierced through, and the 5 huge tentacles were like 5 huge spears descending from the sky with unparalleled power. Poof, poof, poof. However, before the 5 huge spears could get close to Gray, they were cut off by the ice wind blades one after another. They were cut off from the roots, and a layer of ice was attached to the surface. Oof. Rob Tracy didn't care. New tentacles grew out again and combined together, turning into a tentacle bigger than a millstone, and lashed out at Gray. With unparalleled destructive power, a few trees were brushed by it and were instantly smashed into pieces. Swish! 5 wind blades lined up in front of Gray, and then suddenly whizzed out, slashing at the huge shadow tentacle. Poof, 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 poof. The huge shadow tentacle was too big. Even if it was cut by the ice wind blades, it wasn't immediately cut off. However, after being sliced by the 5 frosty wind blades, it was still sliced apart. Let's see how you're going to block this. Seeing that Gray had squandered his Blood Fiend ability 3 times, Rob Tracy estimated that Gray's force of blood was about to be exhausted, and a sneer appeared on his face. Hundreds of shadow tentacles appeared, almost covering the sky. They attacked Gray from all directions, blocking off all possible escape routes for Gray. However, numerous ice wind blades appeared and slashed out quickly. Poof, poof, poof. In front of the ice wind blades, all the shadow tentacles that attacked were like chives and were easily cut off row by row. In just a few moments, the shadow tentacles that were attacking Gray from all directions had completely disappeared. You can actually still display such power. Rob Tracy's sneer froze on his face when he thought that his killing blow was blocked by Gray. Impossible. Your force of blood should have been exhausted. It's impossible for you to still be able to display such a powerful Blood Fiend ability. His face was filled with disbelief as he stared at Gray in shock. Exhausted force of blood? Sorry, I still have a lot of force of blood. Gray sneered. Swish! 5 icy wind blades filled with cold killing intent whizzed out, heading straight for Rob Tracy. Poof, poof, poof. The shadow tentacles appeared in front of Rob Tracy and intertwined to form a huge wall, blocking the 5 ice wind blades. Rob Tracy retreated a few steps to avoid the cold air that was transmitted through the shadow tentacles. His face was gloomy. You can't be a barbarian blood warrior. Other than the magical weapon that can control the Blood Fiends, you also have a magical weapon that can increase the power of the Blood Fiends. He did not believe that Gray could become a barbarian blood warrior at such a young age. Therefore, in his opinion, it was very likely that Gray had mastered a powerful magical weapon. Good, this is really good. Understanding this, his eyes were blazing. When he thought about how Lin Huang not only had a powerful magical weapon that could control the barbarian-level Blood Fiends, but also a magical weapon that could increase his combat power by 1 level, he could not help but feel jealous and eager at the same time. As long as he killed Lin Huang, these 2 magical weapons would be his. At that time, he would have a greater chance of killing Marnell Sidney. Whoosh! He pounced straight at Gray. Because of the powerful magical weapon, the power of Lin Huang's Blood Fiends was not weaker than that of a barbarian blood warrior. However, in terms of physical fitness, Lin Huang definitely had not reached the barbarian level. He instantly saw through Gray's weakness. Whoosh! Gray's expression turned serious. 5 ice wind blades slashed out towards Rob Tracy, who was rushing towards him. Although it was slightly different from what Rob Tracy had guessed, close combat was indeed his weakness. Whoosh! Rob Tracy quickly dodged and avoided 4 of the ice wind blades. Then, he used the short knife in his hand to shatter one of the ice wind blades. The cold air spread. A layer of ice formed on his hand and quickly spread to his body. In an instant, he was frozen. Another 5 ice wind blades attacked the frozen Lin Huang. A large number of shadow tentacles appeared from under his body and intertwined to block in front of him. The shadow tentacles and the ice wind blades both collapsed. After the shadow tentacles disappeared, Lin Huang took advantage of this gap to shatter the ice on his body. He took a few steps back to avoid the spreading cold air and approached Gray from another direction. Gray's eyes were cold. He quickly slashed out ice wind blades in that direction to stop Rob Tracy from approaching. Puff, puff, puff. Their abilities were rapidly colliding and dissolving. The dull sounds that rang out in everyone's ears made their hair stand on end. The front area of Fergus Castle had turned into ruins. In the ruins, large pieces of ice appeared everywhere. Gray and Rob Tracy used all their means. Rob Tracy used his shadow tentacles to block the ice wind blades. Then, he used his barbarian-level ability to close in on Gray. Gray, on the other hand, was constantly casting icy wind blades, intercepting Rob Tracy, who was trying to close in on him. Although Rob Tracy knew that Gray's physical fitness was still at the crazy level, and he targeted this weakness, Gray did not let him succeed. The power of the frost wind blade was not inferior to that of the shadow tentacles. In addition to the cold air it carried, it had a freezing effect. Even if Rob Tracy was frozen by the ice, he would still need a moment of delay to break free. As a result, Rob Tracy was unable to get closer to Gray when he was only a few dozen meters away. Gray also found it difficult to distance himself from his opponent. The two of them were in a deadlock. Boom, boom, boom. Not far from the two of them, the iron-armed barbarian ape and the bear-type blood fiend were fighting. Rocks and soil flew everywhere. The wind whistled. Large areas of buildings collapsed. Even Gray's bedroom had collapsed. Fortunately, Gray had developed the habit of putting important items into his rune space bag. Otherwise, he would have suffered heavy losses. Cracks appeared on the ground one after another. Some of the cracks were wide enough for a child to fall into. The two blood fiends attacked each other violently. Their fists and palms either collided or hammered each other's bodies. The bear-type blood fiend and the iron-armed barbarian ape both had injuries from being hammered by hard objects. The two barbarian-level blood fiends were also in a deadlock. Chapter 295. I can't even get close. Rob Tracy's face darkened as the shadows intertwined to form a wall, blocking the oncoming icy wind blades and retreating to avoid the invading chill. He originally thought that with his abilities as a barbarian blood warrior, it would not be too difficult for him to get close to the other party. But this was not the case. With the help of the magic weapon, the other party's blood fiend ability was not inferior to his shadow ability. If that was the case, he was confident that with his abilities and speed, he would be able to get close to the other party. But the other party's blood fiend ability, in addition to the cutting ability of the wind blades, also had the ability to freeze ice. Although its power was not at the level of a barbarian, it was at the level of a special berserker, which was already able to affect him to a certain extent. The combination of the two attributes immediately became difficult to deal with. After a long struggle, he was still unable to close the distance between him and the other party. Crack! Suddenly, the sound of bones cracking could be heard clearly even in the midst of the battle. Rob Tracy turned his head to look, and his expression changed. The left forearm of the bear-shaped blood fiend he was controlling was unnaturally bent, and the bones were obviously broken. After continuously colliding with the iron arms of the iron-armed barbarian ape, the arm of the bear-shaped blood fiend finally broke. Without a doubt, the battle power of the bear-shaped blood fiend would be greatly reduced after losing an arm, and it would be at a disadvantage in the battle. Fergus family, good, very good. His expression was so cold that it seemed as if he could scrape off ice shards. As a barbarian blood warrior, he was leading a barbarian-level blood fiend to attack a family that was only a viscount a few months ago, and he was actually at a disadvantage. This made him fearful, and at the same time, even angrier. He let out a low roar, and a large number of shadow tentacles appeared around him like bamboo shoots after the rain. Soon, the number of shadow tentacles reached 200 to 300, but it did not stop there. More shadow tentacles appeared, and in the end, the number exceeded 1,000. More than 1,000 shadow tentacles were so densely packed that they covered the moonlight in the sky. They covered the sky and covered the earth, and like a black wave, they attacked Gray. Obviously, they had used their maximum power. They have used their maximum power. Looking at the black wave that blotted out the sky and covered the earth, Gray's expression turned grave. If a barbarian blood warrior didn't care about the consumption of his blood force, the maximum power he could unleash would definitely be extremely terrifying. If he couldn't block it, he would definitely die. Huh. An emerald green tornado appeared in front of Gray and spun rapidly. Then, it suddenly shattered, sending out numerous icy wind blades that slashed toward the shadow tentacles that were surging towards him like a black wave. Poof, poof, poof. Crack, crack, crack. A large number of shadow tentacles were cut off and frozen, and the icy wind blades were shattered by the shadow tentacles. It was as if the black waves were attacking the reef. The waves would shatter after hitting the reef, and the reef would melt under the continuous impact of the waves. The shock waves from the battle spread out in all directions like the explosions of cannonballs. Many of the buildings in the castle collapsed. Many of the trees that had been around since the construction of Fergus Castle were cut down, and the nearby flower beds were destroyed as if a typhoon had passed through. In the basement of the castle, Earl Fergus and the servants and guards of the castle were all hiding. Hearing the terrifying explosions that sounded like landslides and tsunamis above their heads, many of them were so frightened that their faces turned pale and their bodies even trembled slightly. Gray! Earl Fergus clenched his fists tightly, a worried expression on his face. Even if he had the strength of a ferocious blood warrior, he wouldn't be able to interfere in this kind of battle. Poof, poof, poof. Gray and Rob Tracy stood behind the reef formed by the icy wind blades, and the wave formed by the shadow tentacles. They were completely focused on controlling the reef and wave to attack the other party. The icy wind blades gradually decreased, and so did the shadow tentacles. Boom! Finally, with the last wave of attacks, the icy wind blades and shadow tentacles completely disappeared. At this moment, Rob Tracy's eyes suddenly became as cold as a venomous snake's. Whoosh! He suddenly darted towards Gray. With the speed of a ferocious blood warrior. In a situation where there was no obstruction, he didn't even need a second to cross the distance of dozens of meters and suddenly appeared in front of Gray. Although Gray had already retreated when he discovered the other party pouncing towards him, his retreating speed was far slower than the other party's. Die! His voice was cold and low, like the cry of an owl, carrying a deep, killing intent. The two daggers in his hands were as black as ink, and like two black rays of light, they attacked Gray. The terrifying aura of the daggers pierced Gray's skin, causing him to feel a dull pain. Gray held his sword with both hands and swept it out, intercepting the other party's daggers. However, the other party only used one of the daggers to block to the side and had already blocked Gray's sword. The other dagger continued to stab towards Gray, aiming for Gray's heart. Seeing that the dagger was about to stab Gray, suddenly, a huge black palm suddenly appeared. After spreading out, it was bigger than a millstone and was placed between the dagger and Gray. Clang! The dagger stabbed on the huge palm, and in the dark night, bright sparks bloomed. The huge palm seemed to be made of black magic metal. Even under the attack of the dagger, there was not the slightest trace of damage. Boom! Along with the huge palm, a fist as thick as a water tank smashed towards Rob Tracy. It was like a black meteor falling from the sky, continuously enlarging in Rob Tracy's eyes. Bang! Rob Tracy was hit by this fist and flew backwards, crashing into the walls of the castle not far away. Immediately, the walls of the castle collapsed, and the shattered walls buried him. Oh! Taking a deep breath, Gray felt that his back was drenched in cold sweat. At the crucial moment, the iron-armed barbarian ape arrived. Otherwise, the consequences would have been unimaginable. Boom! The rocks that had buried Rob Tracy suddenly sputtered, and a large number of shadow tentacles appeared from within, sweeping out an empty space in the surroundings. PFFF. On the empty space, Rob Tracy crawled up. Suddenly, he spat out a mouthful of blood. The power of the iron-armed barbarian ape's fist was naturally extremely strong. Rob Tracy took a direct hit, and he was obviously injured. How could this be? Looking at the iron-armed barbarian ape protecting Gray behind it, Rob Tracy was astonished. He naturally thought that Gray would order the iron-armed barbarian ape to save himself. So when he pounced, he also ordered the bear-type blood fiend to entangle the iron-armed barbarian ape. However, reality proved that the bear-type blood fiend could not entangle the iron-armed barbarian ape. He looked at the bear-type blood fiend, and his face suddenly turned gloomy. At this moment, the bear-type blood fiend was also crawling out from the ruins. Its 2 arms were unnaturally bent. Its 2 front paws were crippled. "He's injured." Seeing that Rob Tracy was injured, Gray's eyes lit up. Perhaps he could make Rob Tracy stay. He ordered the iron-armed barbarian ape to chase after Rob Tracy, while he maintained a distance and attacked Rob Tracy with icy wind blades. Bang, bang, bang. Shadow tentacles appeared in front of Rob Tracy and blocked all the icy wind blades. Boom. However, a giant fist was already smashing towards him. Rob Tracy's face changed. He quickly retreated and ordered the bear-type blood fiend to meet the attack. The bear-type blood fiend, whose arms were already broken, relied on its huge body to crash into the iron-armed barbarian ape. Boom! The iron-armed barbarian ape was blocked, but a giant fist print appeared on the bear-type blood fiend's chest. Boom, boom, boom. The bear-type blood fiend used its body to crash into the iron-armed barbarian ape, while the iron-armed barbarian ape's fists continuously landed on the bear-type blood fiend's body. Crack! Along with a crisp sound, the bear-type blood fiend's chest caved in, and several of its ribs were broken. However, the bear-type blood fiend did not feel pain at all. It still carried out Rob Tracy's orders without hesitation, and relied on its huge body to crash into the iron-armed barbarian ape. Bang, bang, bang. The icy wind blades slashed towards Rob Tracy, but were blocked by Rob Tracy's shadow ability. Damn it, the expression on Rob Tracy's wrinkled old face kept changing. Then, he suddenly turned around and fled out of the castle. The bear-type blood fiend was half destroyed, and he could not take down Gray Fergus in a short time. He had no chance of winning. After weighing the pros and cons, he made the decision to retreat. This guy is preparing to escape. Gray hurriedly commanded the iron-armed barbarian ape to shake off the bear-type blood fiend and join him. With a light leap, he jumped onto the iron-armed barbarian ape's shoulder and then drove the iron-armed barbarian ape to chase after the fleeing Rob Tracy. His own speed was definitely not enough to catch up to Rob Tracy, but the iron-armed barbarian ape's speed was not bad. Thump, thump, thump. The huge iron-armed barbarian ape covered several meters with each step. It seemed to be moving slowly, but its speed was not slow at all as it chased after Rob Tracy. Rob Tracy, who was fleeing in front, turned around and saw the iron-armed barbarian ape chasing after him. His eyes revealed a gloomy expression as he said in a cold voice, "I can guarantee that if you dare to chase after me, you will see a pile of corpses when you return to the castle." Not good. Gray's expression changed as he turned around to look. Immediately, he saw that the bear-type blood fiend, which had been shaken off by the iron-armed barbarian ape, did not chase after it. Instead, it charged straight into the depths of the castle. It rampaged all the way, and a large number of buildings in the castle collapsed. From the looks of it, the bear-type blood fiend had definitely been ordered to kill anyone on sight. Looking at the sinister expression on Rob Tracy's face in the distance, Gray hesitated for a moment before helplessly commanding the iron-armed barbarian ape to turn back. Chapter 296. Boom! When Gray returned to the castle, he saw a gigantic bear-shaped blood fiend wreaking havoc in the castle. Although both of its arms were broken and many of its ribs were broken, its gigantic body was simply too destructive. There was no need for him to do anything. All he had to do was ram into it. Gray's face was gloomy. In just a short while, almost half of the castle had been destroyed. He hurriedly commanded the iron-armed barbarian apes to entangle the blood fiend and attacked its head with his fists. At the same time, he slashed at the bear-shaped blood fiend's head with his own ice wind blades. Crack! After repeated hammering and slashing, the bear-shaped blood fiend's head was flattened with the sound of bones breaking. Boom! The bear-shaped blood fiend, which was still wreaking havoc a moment ago, suddenly went limp and fell heavily to the ground, raising a cloud of dust. The sounds of fighting suddenly disappeared. In the basement, everyone, including Earl Fergus, could not help but feel nervous. Lord Earl, will young Master Grey be a match for the blood fiend? Lord Lind looked extremely worried. He was one of the few people in the castle who knew the identity of the attacker. Barbarian blood warrior. The other party was a genuine barbarian blood warrior. Although he knew that young Master Grey was very strong and had the assistance of a barbarian-level blood fiend, he could not help but feel deeply worried. After all, the other party was a genuine barbarian blood warrior. No, with Grey's strength and his barbarian-level blood fiend, he will not be weaker than the other party. Earl Fergus knitted his brows. He knew more than Lord Lind and knew that Grey's blood fiend was no weaker than a barbarian blood warrior. Even so, he could not help but feel extremely worried. When he saw Grey enter the basement, he finally heaved a sigh of relief. How was it? Rob Tracy escaped. I could not stop him. Grey shook his head slightly. Rob Tracy escaped. Grey's slightly regretful words were heard by Lord Lind and the others who knew about Rob Tracy's strength and identity. They couldn't help but feel shocked. Just how strong was young Master Grey now? Even a barbarian blood warrior was not his opponent. Moreover, from his tone, it seemed that he was prepared to kill a barbarian blood warrior. When the group of people left the basement and saw the dilapidated castle under the light, they couldn't help but be shocked. Inside the huge castle, there were traces of a fierce battle, which made people shudder with fear. They had no doubt that if they were present during the battle, merely the aftermath of the battle would be enough to kill all of them. The bedroom had been damaged during the battle, and a few rooms had been cleared out. It was not until the second half of the night that Grey was able to lie on the bed. Although he had won the battle with Rob Tracy, it was only a narrow victory. When Rob Tracy had approached him, it had been extremely dangerous. If he hadn't commanded the Iron Arm Barbarian Ape to rescue him in time, he might have died. Not counting the ability to control corpses, in terms of pure battle strength, I should still be slightly inferior to Rob Tracy. After the fusion of the special Wind Attribute Blood Fiend and Ice Attribute Blood Fiend, the Blood Fiend ability was slightly stronger than Rob Tracy's Shadow ability. However, Rob Tracy was a barbarian blood warrior. Other than the Blood Fiend ability, he also had the physique of a barbarian. This was something that Grey did not possess. Combining the two, Grey should be slightly inferior to his opponent. This gap was not large, but if it was a life and death battle, the final winner would most likely be Rob Tracy. After all, I'm not a barbarian blood warrior. To be able to fight to this extent is already not bad. Regarding this, Grey was not too disappointed. Currently, he was only a berserker. He was only slightly weaker than his opponent, who was a barbarian blood warrior. This strength was already extremely strong. In a battle of the same level, except for those powerful magic weapons, Grey estimated that no one would be his match even if he did not use the ability to control corpses. Even if his opponent was a descendant of the royal family or a descendant of a duke's family. Although these people cultivated special blood techniques, his current Blood Fiend ability was a fusion of two special Blood Fiend abilities. Its power was stronger than the special blood techniques cultivated by these people. In the early morning, the castle's servants and soldiers were cleaning up the broken buildings in the castle. Knowing that he had been schemed against by Rob Tracy, Marnell Sidney, who had hurried through the night, rushed here. Rob Tracy really did attack here. Seeing that half of the Fergus castle was damaged, his face sank. After asking and learning that Earl Fergus and Grey were not injured, he let out a sigh of relief. In the castle, a room that had been temporarily cleared out as a living room. I value the magic crystal mine too much, so I was schemed against. Fortunately, you are all fine. Marnell Sidney sighed. Lord Marnell, you don't have to be like this. Not only you, we also couldn't see that this was the other party's scheme. Earl Fergus shook his head. Although he and Grey could see that this was Rob Tracy's scheme, in that kind of complicated situation, it was obviously convenient to say it. The matter of the magic crystal mine was too important. The one who commanded the Iron Arm Barbarian Ape to fight with him yesterday should be you, right? What do you think of his combat power? Marnell Sidney looked at Gray and asked. Very strong. Gray thought for a while and said, and the most troublesome thing is that the other party had a large rune space bag, which could carry the barbarian-level blood fiend with him. The other party had a large rune space bag. Rob Tracy used a barbarian beast in the battle last night? Marnell Sidney asked with a surprised expression. Yes, the only fortunate thing was that the other party's barbarian-level blood fiend wasn't a match for the Iron Arm Barbarian Ape. I cooperated with the Iron Arm Barbarian Ape and narrowly repelled the other party. Gray said solemnly. Marnell Sidney looked at Gray in surprise. Cooperating with a barbarian-level blood fiend, he was actually able to block Rob Tracy. Although it was a close call, this achievement was definitely not simple. But he didn't ask in detail how he did it. Every family had its own secrets. Even if he was a noble, it was not convenient for him to ask too much. This is troublesome. The other party actually had a large rune space bag, but Rob Tracy could actually carry a barbarian-level blood fiend with him, which indeed made him frown. Facing the other party, who could control a barbarian-level blood fiend, he alone did not have the confidence to defeat and kill the other party. Not long after, he left again and headed to the magic crystal mine. With the help of a barbarian-level blood fiend, the other party's combat power was greatly increased. He already had the ability to take down the magic crystal mine, so he had to be careful. A few days after the attack on Fergus Castle, the Sydney Hill quieted down and no more nobles were attacked. But this silence only lasted for a few days. A week later, the attacked noble family appeared again. Obviously, Rob Tracy's injuries had recovered. Gray even felt that the other party's lost barbarian-level blood fiend might have been replenished by the Wallen family. Their combat power was once again at full strength. During this time, Gray personally went to Rock Castle to pick up Madame de Milan, Sarah, Barbara, and the others. Although the Rock family's castle was relatively secretive, it was not absolutely safe. Now that Gray and the Iron Arm Barbarian Ape had joined forces, they had the strength to contend with Rob Tracy. Relatively speaking, Fergus Castle was actually safer. The half-destroyed Fergus Castle was only slightly repaired and not rebuilt. The location of the new Fergus Castle had been chosen and was already working overtime to build it. There was no need to rebuild the old castle. Time passed day by day. For the nobles of the Sydney Hill, it was a kind of torture. From time to time, noble families would be attacked, and some nobles had already been killed. Although they had been hidden, there would always be a time when they would be exposed, and the consequences of that exposure could be imagined. As the hidden noble families were discovered by Rob Tracy one by one, the panic in the Sydney Hill intensified. Under such panic, some noble families moved to Sydney Castle to seek refuge. Some families, such as the Ford family and the Evelyn's family, who were on good terms with the Fergus family, moved to Fergus Castle. Although panic was spreading in the Sydney Hill, the Fergus family was rather quiet, and no more attacks occurred. It seemed that Rob Tracy did not have full confidence in dealing with the Fergus family, so he temporarily gave up on dealing with them. The Fergus family's castle was half destroyed in the previous battle. Now that so many nobles had moved in, there was a serious shortage of empty rooms. Even the nobles could only share a room with 2 or 3 people. But even so, these nobles did not have the slightest intention of complaining. Compared to their lives, this was clearly nothing. A few days later, under the lead of the Red Wing, the Hellhound mercenaries finally arrived at Fergus Castle. Marnell Sidney, who knew the situation, stopped mining the magic crystal mine and took all the magic crystal mine away. He brought another barbaric blood warrior and rushed to Fergus Castle. In the living room of Fergus Castle, Marnell Sidney, Marnan Sidney, Gray, Earl Fergus, the leader of the Hellhound mercenaries, and several staff members were all sitting there. Then I'll have to trouble the Hellhound mercenaries. Marnell Sidney looked at the leader of the Hellhound mercenaries and said, Sir Marnell, please be assured. The Hellhound mercenaries can't guarantee anything, but when it comes to tracking and searching, few mercenary groups can compare. The leader of the Hellhound mercenaries said confidently. It was a woman. Her battle suit clung to her skin. and her hair was tied into a ponytail. She gave off a very capable feeling. Her skin was wheat-colored, and she was very healthy and energetic with a wild beauty. "Then I'll wait for your good news," Mantle Sidney said with a smile. Just now, he had used a piece of clothing to test the other party's searching ability. The result made him very satisfied. The other party easily found the owner of the hidden clothing. Chapter 297. They stayed in Fergus Castle for a day. On the second day, Marnell Sidney, Marnin Sidney, and the Hellhound mercenaries left to search. It was already spring, and the warm sun shone down from the sky. In the undamaged garden of Fergus Castle, the young people of the Fergus family, Twain Ford and Hazel Ford, were sunbathing in the garden. I haven't sunbathed like this for a long time. When I was hiding, I stayed in the secret room and didn't even dare to sunbathe. Bernal had a head of blonde hair. Because of his marriage, he had a mature temperament. It's about the same. Twain Ford, who had an ordinary face but a unique temperament, could not help but smile bitterly when he heard Bernal's words. "I don't know if we can successfully find Rob Tracy this time." Speaking of Rob Tracy, a lingering fear flashed across his face. Ford Castle had also been attacked by Rob Tracy. Fortunately, he was not in the castle at that time and had hidden. Otherwise, he would have been dead by now. It should be possible. I saw the Hellhound mercenaries' searching ability yesterday. They are indeed very strong, Bernal said. But Rob Tracy is not an ordinary person. He is the leader of an assassin organization and has the strength of a barbaric blood warrior. From the fact that he could avoid the search of Sidney, we can see that he is very good at hiding his whereabouts. Hazel said with her delicate eyebrows slightly furrowed. She was wearing a white sweater, and her figure was curvaceous. However, there was a trace of haggardness on her face. She had been in hiding for more than a month, and she had been anxious. "We can't be too optimistic," Caroline, who was wearing a purple dress and had a curvaceous figure, said. "Gray, what do you think?" She looked at Gray. "It's hard to say. The Hellhound mercenaries are indeed very good at tracking, but Rob Tracy is not simple either." Gray shook his head. Neither side was simple, and he had no way to judge. "Let's not talk about whether we can find it for the time being. If we can find it, Gray, how likely do you think Sir Marnell will be to keep Rob Tracy?" Bernal asked. "Probably 70%. Gray thought for a moment and replied. "There's only a 70% chance that Sir Marner and Sir Nan will join forces." Hazel's eyes widened as she looked at Gray. The others also looked at Gray with puzzled expressions. The blood technique that Rob Tracy cultivated could only be considered average in terms of combat power. Both Marner Sidney and Marnin Sidney cultivated special blood arts. Logically speaking, if the two of them worked together, there should be no chance of failure. Under normal circumstances, it would be almost impossible to escape, even if Rob Tracy had a magical weapon that could control the barbarian-level blood fiends. Gray explained. But Rob Tracy is now attached to the Wallen family. With the Wallen family's background, they would definitely have some magical weapons that could save his life, and they would most likely lend them to him temporarily. The Wallen family. At the mention of the Wallen family, everyone could not help but feel a chill in their hearts. Rob Tracy was not alone. He had the Wallen family behind him. As one of the Marquis family, the Wallen family's background was needless to say. It was entirely possible that they would have some magical weapons that could save his life. A few days later, there was news. The Hellhound mercenaries had successfully found Rob Tracy in a forest near city. Marner Sidney and Marnin Sidney attacked Rob Tracy and severely injured Rob Tracy. However, Rob Tracy took out a magical weapon with a speed ability, exploded with terrifying speed, and successfully escaped. They actually failed to kill him on the spot. In the study of Fergus Castle, Bernal, who had heard the news, was astonished. He then looked at Gray. "You're right. Since then, Rob Tracy has obviously become a lot more cautious. He even created some fake clues to mislead the Hellhound mercenaries. The subsequent few attempts to track him down have failed. Sir Marner and Sir Marnin have already split into two groups to track Rob Tracy." At this point, Earl Fergus looked at Gray. "Rob Tracy no longer has any barbarian-level blood fiends, and he is seriously injured. Any barbarian blood warrior is enough to deal with him. Sir Marner wants the Fergus family to bring along the iron-armed barbarian ape to participate in the hunt. But what about the safety of the castle? Gray said with a worried look. That's right, father. If the iron-armed barbarian ape is taken away, won't the castle become unsafe? Bernal also looked worried. You don't have to worry about the safety of the castle. Rob Tracy is currently very far from Fergus Castle. Furthermore, he is being chased by Sir Marner and Sir Marner. He has no energy to attack Fergus Castle. Earl Fergus shook his head. On the other hand, the Fergus family has been targeted by Rob Tracy. If he escapes this time, the Fergus family will be in danger in the future. I understand. I'll rush over now. Gray nodded solemnly. After driving away the iron-armed barbarian ape, Gray hurried on his way. It took him 2 days to arrive at the rendezvous point with a team of Hellhound mercenaries. Young Master Gray, the leader of this team of Hellhound mercenaries, was a beautiful woman with wheat-colored skin. She was the leader of the Hellhound mercenaries, Olora Garcia. Leader Olora, sorry to bother you for a while. Gray smiled. Young Master Gray is too polite. Olora Garcia smiled. She didn't have any intention of looking down on the noble young man in front of her. This was because she had already heard from the Red Wing that the young man in front of her was a genuine berserker. Moreover, he had once killed the leader of the Mantis mercenary group, a berserker, in the mercenary city arena. Even among berserkers, the other party's strength was quite strong. The two sides met and the team set off. The iron-armed barbarian ape was controlled by Gray and followed far behind the team to avoid alerting Rob Tracy in advance due to the large movement. A few days later, they found traces of a bonfire in a mountainous area. Olora Garcia judged after careful observation. Rob Tracy should have stopped here. Leader Olora, how did you determine that this was the place where Rob Tracy had stopped and not left behind by someone else? Gray asked curiously. Along the way, Gray had been asking Olora Garcia for guidance on searching techniques. Seeing that Olora Garcia was actually able to determine that Rob Tracy had stopped here and not someone else, he couldn't help but be curious. The surroundings of this bonfire are filled with sand and stones. After staying here, there would definitely be traces left behind. However, there are no traces here. Clearly, the other party was very cautious and removed the traces. When he left, he erased all traces of himself. This means that he was trying to avoid being tracked down. At present, the only person who would do such a thing is Rob Tracy. Thus, I'm certain that this is a place where Rob Tracy once stayed. Olora Garcia said with a smile. Rob Tracy was too cautious, and because of that, he exposed himself. Gray came to a sudden realization. He couldn't help but have a higher opinion of the leader of the Hellhound mercenaries. Rob Tracy had been afraid of being tracked, so he had removed his traces. This had instead become evidence that the other party had stayed here. Rob Tracy's method of concealing his tracks could be said to be brilliant, but the leader of the Hellhound mercenaries was even more brilliant than him. The group continued their pursuit. A day later, they found traces of Rob Tracy beside a natural lake. This proved that their pursuit was correct. Although he used a scent-concealing potion, I can still smell some traces of his scent. It seems that he left not too long ago, not more than a day ago. Olora Garcia judged after leading the group to investigate the surroundings for a moment. Judging that Rob Tracy had left not more than a day ago, the group's spirits were lifted and they continued their pursuit. After entering a forest and traversing several lush mountains, they stopped. Leader, the scent is scattered here. It's split into 5 areas. A young man frowned and said, the other 2 groups have each chosen a route and are chasing after him. Olora Garcia squatted down and carefully examined the remaining 3 routes. She followed the routes for some distance and finally chose this one. Let's follow this route and follow it. She chose a route with sparse vegetation. Leader, why did you choose this route? The mercenary from before asked. As for the other 2 routes, the vegetation is too lush, making it inconvenient for injured people to travel. On the other hand, a frightened wild beast would choose such a dense forest in a panic situation. Therefore, I believe that among the 3 routes, It is very likely that the other party has chosen this route. Oh, Laura Garcia explained. The group continued their pursuit. After half a day, they stopped again. Leader, the scent is scattered again. The scent in front of them had once again split into three. Looks like we're following the right direction. Oh, Laura Garcia nodded. Since the scent was scattered again, it meant that the one passing through this route was definitely Rob Tracy. Using the same method, they determined Rob Tracy's most likely route and continued their pursuit. Half a day later, they saw a figure moving through the forest in the distance. It was a figure dressed in black. He had a medium build and a slightly bent back. If they were not mistaken, he should be an old man. Rob Tracy. Gray's eyes had a cold glint. Even though the distance was rather far, and he could only see the back of the figure, he could tell at a glance that the person in the distance was undoubtedly Rob Tracy. He had already met Rob Tracy twice, so he had a good understanding of Rob Tracy. More importantly, the other party had appeared on the route they had investigated. Chapter 298. Rob Tracy. It's Rob Tracy. Found him. The Hellhound mercenaries were overjoyed. After searching for several days and sleeping in the open, they had finally tracked him down. But when they thought of the barbarian blood warrior's strength, the Hellhound mercenaries could not help but shudder. A barbarian blood warrior, even if injured, was not someone they could deal with. Young Master Gray, what should we do now? Laura Garcia looked at Gray and asked. The Hellhound mercenaries were only responsible for tracking. Her task was basically completed. The rest had nothing to do with the Hellhound mercenaries. The movement of the barbarian blood fiends is too big. There is no way to approach quietly. Contact Sir Marnell and Sir Marnin. When they arrive, we will attack together. After thinking for a moment, Gray decided not to act rashly. Rob Tracy had a speed magic weapon on him. If he was alarmed, he would definitely activate the magic weapon and escape. His speed was not as fast as the other party, and the other party had activated the speed magic weapon. Gray would not be able to catch up. Instead, he would waste an opportunity. Understood. Oh, Laura Garcia nodded. She immediately sent out a messenger bird to inform the other two teams of their current location. They quietly followed Rob Tracy. The next day, the team led by Marnell Sidney and the team led by Marnin Sidney arrived one after another. Rob Tracy, let's see how you escape this time. Marnell Sidney clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. Because of Rob Tracy, the Sidney Hill had been in chaos for more than a month. He hated him to the core. This time, we can't let him escape. Marnin Sidney's eyes flashed with cold, murderous intent. He can't escape. Marnell Sidney snorted coldly. In a moment, the two of us will circle to the front, and each of us will block a direction. I will use my Blood Fiend ability to kill him in one go. If I can't kill him, you quickly take over. Don't give him a chance to breathe. Understood. Marnin Sidney nodded with a cold light in his eyes. Marnell Sidney looked at Gray again. Gray, wait a moment. The two of us will make a detour to the front and attack first. You will use the commotion as a signal to drive the iron-armed barbarian apes from the back and block the rear. All right. Gray nodded solemnly, his eyes filled with killing intent. Rob Tracy had to be eliminated, even if it was only for the sake of the Fergus family. He couldn't stay in the Fergus family forever. As long as Rob Tracy didn't die, the Fergus family would always be in the shadow of death. Therefore, Rob Tracy had to die. In the forest, Rob Tracy, who was dressed in black, moved forward cautiously. Under his black clothes, there were circles and circles of bandages. Those were the injuries he suffered in the last battle. Faced with the siege of Marnell Sidney and Marnin Sidney, if it weren't for the speed magic weapon on him, he would probably be dead now. Even so, he was seriously injured. Although it wasn't as serious as the last time, it was still a serious injury. Damn it! With the Sidney Noble's shallow tracking methods, they shouldn't be able to track me down. They must have asked other forces for help. Since you dare to get involved in this matter, no matter what force you are from, just wait for my revenge. Hiss. Because of his anger, his body moved a little more, and he was in so much pain that he grimaced. Because of his injuries, he didn't dare to move too fast. Too much pain was one thing. The most troublesome thing was that it would reopen his wounds and worsen his injuries. Maybe he would die from his injuries before he could escape from Sydney. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Suddenly, a strange sound rang out. He raised his head to look in the direction of the sound, and his face instantly turned pale. In front of him, a large number of black blades appeared and covered the sky. With a terrifying whistling sound, they attacked him. Whoosh! Activating the speed magic weapon on him. He ignored the pain and quickly retreated to dodge. However, there were simply too many sharp black blades that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Furthermore, they had appeared too suddenly. He couldn't dodge. He was about to be pierced into a hedgehog by the dense blades. He had to stop and use the shadow ability to protect himself. A large number of shadow tentacles quickly appeared under him. There were more than 1,000 of them. Quickly, they turned into a black shield more than 1 meter thick and blocked the direction of the black blades. Bang, bang, bang. The black blades hit the black shield and made a dull sound. A large number of shadow tentacles were defeated. The black blades were extremely powerful. The thickness of the black shield was quickly thinning. Puff! Finally, the black shield was so thin that it was only a thin layer. With a stab of a black blade, it was instantly penetrated. His back was instantly pierced by a sharp blade. Enduring the pain, he quickly dodged. But there were black blades everywhere. Where could he hide? Several sharp blades were stabbed into his back again, and scarlet blood splattered everywhere. Fortunately, at this time, the number of black blades sprinkling down from the sky finally decreased. But before he could rejoice, the black blades that blotted out the sky and covered the earth appeared again, attacking him from another direction. Rob Tracy can't escape this time. In the distance, the Hellhound mercenaries, who did not have the strength to participate in the battle, could only watch from afar. Seeing this scene, they could not help but exclaim. Rob Tracy had no chance of escaping. Faced with the sudden appearance of the black blades, Rob Tracy did not even have the chance to use the Blood Beast ability. There was absolutely no way for him to escape. Oh no, that is... Suddenly, Laura Garcia looked at the trees around Rob Tracy with a shocked expression. She saw the trees around Rob Tracy move unnaturally despite the absence of wind. Then they quickly grew. They rapidly grew in clusters, turning into giant umbrellas one after another. They propped up a huge canopy and protected Rob Tracy under it. Bang, bang, bang. The metal blades collided with the canopy. The canopy displayed an unusually strong defense. It was not torn apart by the metal blades immediately and withstood the impact of the metal blades. Wood chips flew everywhere, and metal blades were also sent flying. Unexpectedly, the black metal blades and the green canopy were in a stalemate. How can this be? Who is it that did this? One of the Hellhound mercenaries was shocked. They knew the power of those metal blades. Each of them had unimaginable destructive power. They could even easily pierce through steel as thick as a water bucket. But they did not tear the barrier formed by the plants into pieces immediately. One could imagine how hard these plants were at this time. They were definitely far stronger than steel. It should be a barbarian blood warrior. Laura Garcia judged with a solemn expression. Only a barbarian blood warrior could block the attack of a barbarian blood warrior. There should be a force coming to rescue Rob Tracy, and there should be at least one barbarian blood warrior in the team. In the end, all the metal blades were blocked by the green canopy. There was only a thin layer of the canopy left, but it still blocked all the attacks for Rob Tracy. Oh no! Seeing the sudden appearance of the plants protecting Rob Tracy, Marner Sidney and Marnin Sidney both changed their expressions. After the metal blades attacked, they rushed towards Rob Tracy. At this moment, two figures rushed out of the woods and blocked their way, protecting Rob Tracy behind them. These two old men were not young. Their faces were full of wrinkles, and their backs were a little bent. But at this time, they exuded an aura that was not inferior to Marner Sidney and Marnin Sidney. Ralph Wallen, it's your Wallen family again. Marner Sidney's eyes were spitting fire as he gritted his teeth. Last time, it was because the Wallen family was unable to completely kill Rob Tracy that the Sidney family suffered a disaster for more than a month. Now, Just as they were about to kill Rob Tracy, the Wallen family appeared again and saved Rob Tracy. One could imagine the anger in his heart. What? You're angry at this level? What you did to the Sidney family was even worse than what I did to Warren. One of the old men of the Wallen family, Ralph Wallen, who had appeared during the encirclement of the Shadow Serpent, had a cold smile on his face. You actually caused a beast tide to attack my Wallen family. My Wallen family's losses are much greater than yours this time. Even a direct descendant died. That was a beast tide. It has nothing to do with my Sidney family. Marner Sidney snorted. He naturally would not admit to such a matter of principle. Hypocrite. Your Sidney family is still hypocritical. You did it, but you don't even dare to admit it. Another old man of the Wallen family sneered. In terms of hypocrisy, how can my Sidney family compare to your Wallen family? Marnan Sidney said coldly. More than 10 years ago, on the battlefield with the Flame Kingdom, my Sidney Hill encountered the Duke family of the Flame Kingdom. Many noble families that were in theft suffered heavy losses, and the older generation almost died. Is this Duke family really not caused by your Wallen family? Does it really have nothing to do with you? Funny, your Sidney family was unlucky to encounter the Duke family of the Flame Kingdom. They were no match for them and suffered heavy losses. What does it have to do with my Wallen family? If you say that all of this is related to my Wallen family, does your Sidney family have any evidence? The old man of the Wallen family laughed disdainfully. No one knew what the original enmity between the two families was, but over the years, the enmity had been increasing and had reached an irreconcilable level. It was common for them to plot against each other, but this kind of thing naturally could not be admitted openly. Chapter 299. Hand over Rob Tracy. Manel Sidney and Manon Sidney exuded a strong, murderous aura as they spoke in a cold voice. Impossible. Ralph Wallen and the other old man from the Wallen family sneered and refused to budge an inch. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. Manel Sidney and Manon Sidney were furious. Around them, a large amount of black metal powder appeared and turned into metal blades with a deep, cold, murderous intent. Covering the sky and covering the earth, it carried a terrifying might that could easily pierce through steel as it shot out, enveloping the two of them, and even Rob Tracy, who was behind them. The air was full of hair-raising, whistling sounds. In the distance, the Hellhound mercenaries knew that these metal blades were not targeted at them, but they could not help but tremble when they heard them. Facing this metal arrow rain, with a terrifying destructive power, Ralph Wallen and the other old man from the Wallen family remained calm and snorted coldly. Then the plants around the two men suddenly grew wildly and turned into a plant shield, blocking the metal blades that were coming at them. The originally very ordinary trees, under the stimulation of the two men's blood beast ability, were far harder than steel and blocked all the metal blades that were coming at them. Metal blades and wood shavings flew everywhere, and the dull sound of impact sounded like a clap of thunder. We'll hold them off here. You go first. After blocking the attacks of Manel Sidney and Manon Sidney, Ralph Wallen looked back at Rob Tracy and said, "Okay." Rob Tracy gritted his teeth and pulled out the metal blades from his body. He swallowed a bottle of healing potion to stop the bleeding. His face was extremely pale, but he nodded and used the speed magic weapon. His body turned into a black afterimage and quickly retreated. Manel Sidney and Manon Sidney were anxious and quickly rushed at Rob Tracy, but they were stopped by the two men from the Wallen family. They fought wildly, sometimes clashing with their blood beast ability, sometimes in close combat. Using the speed magic weapon, Rob Tracy traveled 100 meters in the blink of an eye. Suddenly, the air was filled with a sharp, whistling sound. Swish, swish, swish. In the forest, emerald green wind blades suddenly appeared and blocked his path, completely covering Rob Tracy and the area around Rob Tracy. Whoosh! Rob Tracy, who was running, suddenly moved dozens of meters to the side. At the place where he was just now, the trees were cut off, and the surrounding trees and the ground were all covered in a layer of ice. The sudden change in direction caused Rob Tracy's face to twitch in pain. He had no choice but to stop the speed magic weapon. Seeing the spreading ice and the people blocking his way, he immediately said with a cold glint in his eyes, It's you, Rob Tracy. You've been in Sydney for more than a month, and you want to leave just like that. Staring at Rob Tracy and guarding against Rob Tracy, suddenly activating the speed magic weapon to escape, Gray said coldly. Originally, he thought that Rob Tracy would definitely die under the encirclement of the three men, but he didn't expect that the people from the Wallen family would suddenly appear and save Rob Tracy at the most critical moment. It was the same last time, and it was the same this time. It had to be said that Rob Tracy's life was not ordinary. Every time he was in a life and death crisis, someone would come to his rescue in time. Who's there? Sensing the movement behind them, the two old men from the Wallen family looked back. Seeing that a young man suddenly appeared and blocked Rob Tracy's path, their faces turned cold and their eyes were filled with murderous intent. A large number of plants quickly grew and spread, attacking Gray. Ralph Wallen, do you really think we don't exist? Of course, Marner Sidney and Marnin Sidney wouldn't allow such a thing to happen. The sharp blades attacked the two men from the Wallen family, and from time to time, they would approach the two men from the Wallen family and engage in close combat, forcing the two men to defend with all their strength and no longer have the energy to deal with Gray. Boom, boom. The metal blades collided with the plants and vines crazily. The blades were shattered, the vines were shattered, and the surrounding ground was affected by the aftermath, becoming bumpy like a meteorite crater. What, you want to stop me? Rob Tracy revealed a light smile on his face. I do plan to do so. Guarding against Rob Tracy's sudden escape, Gray nodded. You think you can stop me? Rob Tracy's face showed disdain. Whether I can stop you or not, we'll only know after we try. Gray was fully alert. His opponent had a speed magic weapon, and his current speed was only at the level of a berserker. It was indeed quite difficult to stop his opponent. But as long as it was possible, he would do his best. Rob Tracy was a serious threat to the Fergus family, and such a threat had to be eradicated. And you could try. Rob Tracy sneered. He admitted that his opponent's blood fiend ability was indeed powerful, but it was impossible to stop him with his speed. Whoosh! The speed magic weapon was activated, and he shot to the side like a phantom. Fast, it was really too fast. Wherever he passed, there were afterimages left behind. His speed was unimaginably fast. Swish, swish, swish. Gray's face was solemn, and he hurriedly intercepted him. An icy wind blade slashed out in front of him, intercepting Rob Tracy's path. The icy wind blade slashed across, and wherever it passed, trees were easily cut down. The cut was smooth as a mirror. Rob Tracy, who had rushed forward, suddenly retreated rapidly, and then dashed in another direction. Puff! A deep fissure that was more than 10 meters long appeared on the ground at the spot where the fissure had been. Puff, puff, puff. One after another, icy wind blades attacked, intercepting Rob Tracy, but all of them were dodged by Rob Tracy. If it weren't for the fact that the frost wind blades had a cold nature and could cover a large area, Rob Tracy would have an even easier time. Even so, as he dashed left and right, Rob Tracy was about to break through Gray's blockade. Gray, whose speed was only at the berserker level, wanted to stop Rob Tracy, who was using a speed magic weapon and whose speed far exceeded that of an ordinary berserker. It was too difficult. You can't stop me. If he wanted to see, he would have to break through Gray's interception. Rob Tracy was delighted. He turned his head and looked coldly at Gray, not hiding the murderous intent in his eyes. This time, after recovering from his injuries, he must find an opportunity to kill this young man. Not only because he was obstructing his escape, but also because his growth was too fast. Boom! At this moment, there was a loud explosion, and the trees in front of him collapsed in rows. Then, he saw a tree that was more than 10 meters long sweeping horizontally towards him. The trees from before were all swept down by this giant tree. His expression changed, and he hurriedly retreated, looking in the direction of the giant tree with a puzzled gaze. He saw that one end of the giant tree was being held in the hands of a huge creature covered in black fur. The huge creature was 7 meters tall, and its two arms were as thick as buckets. This was the blood fiend he had seen at the Fergus family. You actually brought this blood fiend with you. His face twisted in pain, and then he turned his head and looked coldly at Gray, who had taken advantage of this gap to block his path once again. "Aren't you afraid that I will attack the Fergus family? Do you have the energy?" Gray sneered. "After this, I will destroy your Fergus family." Rob Tracy gritted his teeth. "Let's not talk about whether you can escape or not. Do you think that you can destroy the Fergus family now?" Gray's face was full of disdain. When he joined forces with the iron-armed barbarian ape, their combat strength was not inferior to Rob Tracy's, who could control a barbarian-level blood fiend. Even if Rob Tracy attacked again, he would not be afraid. Crack, crack! Gray commanded the iron-armed barbarian ape to attack Rob Tracy. The iron-armed barbarian ape was holding a giant tree that was more than 10 meters long. It ran a few steps and then violently swept it away. A large area of trees was directly swept down. "Run!" Activating his speed magic weapon, Rob Tracy dodged and broke through the encirclement in another direction. He had no intention of tangling with Gray. With his severely injured body, he might not be a match for Gray alone, let alone with the addition of a barbarian-level blood fiend. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Icy wind blades appeared in front of him, blocking his path. He had no choice but to retreat and dodge. Behind him, the iron-armed barbarian ape had already swept over again with the giant tree in its arms. He once again dashed in another direction. Under the joint forces of Gray and the iron-armed barbarian ape, the pressure on him suddenly multiplied, and he could no longer easily escape. He kept dodging and dashing left and right. The injuries on his body, under the intense change in direction, split open again. His face turned ashen, and he endured the intense pain every minute and every second. However, after continuously dashing left and right, relying on his terrifying speed, he finally seized an opportunity and dashed out from a narrow gap, escaping from the encirclement of Gray and the iron-armed barbarian ape. "Just you wait." He did not turn his head, only leaving behind these cold words. After recovering from his injuries, he would definitely make the Fergus family, and even the Fergus territory, pay a heavy price. He did not believe that the Fergus family would hide in the castle and not come out. Moreover, even if he could not find an opportunity to attack the Fergus family, he could still attack the nobles of the Fergus family. As long as these noble families were destroyed, the Fergus territory would be in chaos, and they would be forced to come out of the Fergus castle. Suddenly, whoosh, in front of him, a giant vine suddenly appeared and transformed into a giant spear. The tip of the spear was dark green, and it quickly pierced towards him. Sudden, it was too sudden. After breaking through the encirclement of Gray Fergus and the iron-armed barbarian ape, there was still an attack coming from the front. The attack was too sudden, and it was under the cover of the dense forest. When he noticed it, it was only a few meters away from him. Chapter 300. Poof! The huge vine spear pierced Rob Tracy's body. Rob Tracy's body could not help but tremble and retreat more than 10 steps. The attack was too sudden. Even he was unable to dodge it in time. However, the impact from the vine was not too strong. The power of the attack was only at the mad level. He heaved a sigh of relief. He changed his direction and broke out from another direction. During the process, he looked at the place where the vine had pierced his body. In the next moment, his face suddenly turned deathly pale. He saw that there were streaks of green liquid seeping out from the place where the vine had pierced his abdomen. It looked like the juice of a plant. However, that was not the juice of a plant. That was his blood. Patter. Waves of numbness spread to his body through the wound. His whole body was numb, and he gradually lost control of his body. While running, Rob Tracy suddenly staggered. He could not stand steadily and held onto a tree beside him to prevent himself from falling. Poison. Holding onto the tree for support, waves of weakness attacked his body. Rob Tracy turned his head with difficulty and looked at Gray, who was walking towards him unhurriedly. "It's actually poisonous." "Gray." "Fergus, you..." His eyes showed that he wanted to swallow Gray alive. If looks could kill, Gray would have been killed 100 times over. He really did not expect that such an accident would happen just as he was about to escape. His opponent could control plants and hid a strong poison in them. What a strong poison! Seeing the green liquid flowing out from Rob Tracy's abdomen, even Gray, who had personally taken action, could not help but feel a chill in his heart. Barbarian blood warriors were strong not only in their bodies and blood fiends, but also in their resistance to various unfavorable factors. For example, they had an extremely strong resistance to cold, high temperature, poison, and the paralyzing effect of lightning. Normal poisons had no effect on barbarian blood warriors. As for special poisons, they were very difficult to obtain. That was why blood warriors rarely used poison on their weapons in battle, as it was completely useless. However, after Rob Tracy was poisoned, even his blood had turned green. One could imagine how strong the poison was. Whoosh! A plant tentacle extended towards Gray and stopped in front of Gray. A dark green dagger was wrapped around the tentacle. Gray took the dagger and carefully put it away. This dagger was obtained by Gray in the ruins of the Blue Sea Forest. At that time, Sophia obtained a gun, and he obtained this dagger. Although he had long known that the poison of this dagger was very strong, and that even a ferocious blood warrior would die immediately after being scratched, he had not expected it to be so strong that even a ferocious blood warrior could not resist it. The reason why he had combined this dagger with the plant's ability to sneak attack Rob Tracy was only to cause some trouble for Rob Tracy. He did not expect the effect to be so good that it exceeded his expectations. Before this, he had underestimated this dagger. An item obtained from the ruins of the Empire was indeed not simple. So it was you who did it. Seeing Gray put away the dark green dagger, Rob Tracy naturally understood that Gray must have hidden this dagger in the plant's tentacle and used it to attack him. Looks like you won't be able to take revenge on the Fergus family. Gray stood a few dozen meters away from Rob Tracy and looked at Rob Tracy with ridicule. He did not rashly approach and was on guard against his opponent's counterattack. A person on the verge of death was very crazy. You despicable! Rob Tracy's teeth chattered as he glared at Gray. The intense dizziness caused his body to sway, but he forced himself not to fall. I suggest you control your emotions. The more agitated you are, the faster the poison will spread, and the faster you will die. Gray sneered as he coldly stared at Rob Tracy and silently waited for his death. Cough, cough. You don't even dare to approach a person on the verge of death. Rob Tracy's face was already ashen. The poison had already invaded his entire body. His expression changed again and again. Suddenly, he let out a sinister roar. Die with me. Activating his speed magic weapon, his figure suddenly pounced toward Gray. The two daggers in his hands viciously slashed toward Gray. Clang, clang. Gray, who had long been on guard against his opponent, immediately ordered the iron-armed barbarian ape to intercept. The two arms of the iron-armed barbarian ape easily blocked the attack of Rob Tracy, who was already an arrow at the end of its flight. Rob Tracy was knocked back. Even if I die, I will make you accompany me in death, Rob Tracy roared. His voice was gloomy and cold, like an evil spirit from hell. Whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. A large number of shadow tentacles appeared. Every one of them was as sharp as a blade, and they attacked Gray. Gray's expression did not change. He ordered the iron-armed barbarian ape to block in front of him while he rapidly retreated. Rumble. The iron-armed barbarian ape rolled out like a rolling stone, as if it had been hit by a giant hammer. Large swaths of trees were smashed by it, and a clear trail was plowed out on the ground. After sending the iron-armed barbarian ape flying, many of the shadow tentacles were broken. However, there were still many shadow tentacles that whistled as they attacked Gray. Gray calmly retreated and slashed out several wind blades. A large number of shadow tentacles were chopped off. Finally, before the shadow tentacles could reach him, all of them were chopped off. Afterwards, he looked in the direction of Rob Tracy, only to see that the other party's eyes were filled with viciousness and unwillingness as he fell stiffly to the ground, no longer moving. He actually killed Rob Tracy? In the distance, the Hellhound mercenaries were all dumbstruck. After seeing the two elders of the Wallen family appear, they all thought that Rob Tracy would escape. They never thought that Rob Tracy would actually die, and at the hands of an excessively young man. It should be because his injuries were too severe. Otherwise, a barbarian blood warrior with many magic weapons wouldn't have been killed so easily. A hellhound mercenary said. Indeed, Rob Tracy was injured one after another. His injuries have seriously affected his battle strength. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been unable to dodge that poisonous dagger. Another hellhound mercenary nodded. Although Rob Tracy's injuries are too severe, the main reason is Gray Fergus's strength. Oh, Laura Garcia shook her head. Even if we don't count the iron-armed barbarian ape, his strength is probably close to that of a barbarian blood warrior. I even faintly feel that his strength is not inferior to a true barbarian blood warrior. The hellhound mercenaries all looked at their leader, oh, Laura Garcia, in shock. Not inferior to a true barbarian blood warrior? Leader, are you sure you're not mistaken? I'm not sure, but if we count that iron-armed barbarian ape, a normal barbarian blood warrior shouldn't be his match. Oh, Laura Garcia said with certainty. Rob Tracy is dead. Bastard, he actually killed Rob Tracy. Even in the midst of the battle, the two members of the Wallen family were paying attention to the battle between Rob Tracy and Gray. When they saw that Rob Tracy had been killed by Gray, the two members of the Wallen family's faces immediately turned ashen, and they looked in Gray's direction viciously. Haha, good kill. Manel Sidney and Marnan Sidney both laughed heartily. The culprit who had caused chaos in the Sidney territory for more than a month and left them in a terrible state was finally killed. Ralph Wallen, you didn't expect this, did you? Manel Sidney's face was full of ridicule. He had originally thought that Rob Tracy would be able to escape this time. After all, Rob Tracy had a speed magic weapon in his hands, and it would be difficult for Gray to stop him. He had not expected that in the end, he would be able to stop him and even kill him. This made them both surprised and delighted. You want me to die with you? Sorry, I haven't lived long enough. Looking at Rob Tracy's fallen body, Gray sneered. Without rushing forward rashly, Gray called back the iron-armed barbarian ape that had been flung away. There were some hideous wounds on the iron-armed barbarian ape's body. Although its iron arms were huge and covered its head and other vital parts, it was still unable to cover every part of its body. Crack! Gray ordered the iron-armed barbarian ape to step forward and stomp on the other party's head. Even the skull was crushed. After confirming that the other party was dead, Gray walked forward and used his sword to cut open the other party's clothes, searching the other party's body. Two short knives, a rune space bag, a black metal bracelet, and a green metal ring. These were all the items on its body. After wiping everything with a cloth, Gray put them away. These items had to be handed over. Although he was the one who killed Rob Tracy, if Manel Sidney and Manon Sidney had not destroyed his barbarian blood fiend and seriously injured him, he would not have been able to kill him. Of course, he believed that he would be able to get at least one of these items. After all, he was the one who killed Rob Tracy in the end, and the Sidney family would not treat him unfairly. Otherwise, who would dare to work for the Sidney family in the future? Boom, boom, boom. The battle between Manel Sidney, Manon Sidney, and the two members of the Walloon family continued. They used both their blood fiend abilities in close combat. The metal blades were deflected, and the plant tentacles were shattered. From time to time, their weapons would collide. After exchanging blows, the ground was full of cracks. Damn it! Ralph Wallen's eyes were about to spit fire. He really did not expect that two barbarian blood warriors would not be able to save Rob Tracy. What made him even angrier was that the rune space bag and speed magic weapon in Rob Tracy's hands belonged to the Wallen family, but now they had fallen into the hands of the enemy. Let's retreat. The other old man's eyes were also filled with anger, but he frowned and said, they had already failed to save Rob Tracy, and the two of them could not kill the two members of the Sidney family. There was no point in continuing the battle. Boom! At this moment, the two of them suddenly felt the vines behind them tremble violently. Looking sideways, they saw the numerous vine tentacles suddenly shatter. Wood shavings flew everywhere, revealing a huge gap. The first thing they saw was a huge fist, and then a 7-meter-tall behemoth. The behemoth punched a few times, and immediately the plants around the gap were blown away. It stepped through the gap, and its fist, which was as thick as a water tank, quickly hammered towards them along with the plant debris. Chapter 301. Oomph. Ralph Wallen snorted coldly. A large number of tentacles quickly grew and whizzed towards the iron-armed barbarian ape. Bang, bang. The iron-armed barbarian ape's two huge fists alternately punched out. The tentacles that attacked the iron-armed barbarian ape were instantly shattered. Bang. However, the number of tentacles attacking the iron-armed barbarian ape was gradually unable to deal with them. Its body was inevitably hit and was knocked back repeatedly, increasing its injuries. As an existence that cultivated a special blood technique, Ralph Wallen's strength was definitely stronger than the iron-armed barbarian ape. Be careful, the other old man from the Wallen family warned loudly. Boom! Suddenly, a figure shattered the wall of vines from the other side and attacked Ralph Wallen with a sword. It was none other than Marnell Sidney. Ralph Wallen attacked the iron-armed barbarian ape. Only the other old man from the Wallen family was left to deal with Marnell Sidney and Marnell Sidney. Fighting one against two, the old man from the Wallen family was suddenly unable to hold on. Marnell Sidney broke through the blockade and approached him. Poof! Ralph Wallen's expression changed, and he quickly retreated. However, Marnell Sidney was too fast. His arm was still grazed by the sword. Immediately, scarlet blood spilled out from his arm. Damn it! Looking at his bleeding arm that was grazed by the sword, Ralph Wallen's expression was gloomy. He gave up on dealing with the iron-armed barbarian ape and used all his strength to control the vines to attack Marnell Sidney. He stopped Marnell Sidney, who was rushing towards him. Thump, thump. On the other side, the attacks on the iron-armed barbarian ape all disappeared. The iron-armed barbarian ape immediately rushed towards Ralph Wallen. Retreat. Looking at the iron-armed barbarian ape rushing towards him, Ralph Wallen's expression was gloomy. While controlling a large number of vines to attack Marnell Sidney to stop him from approaching, he controlled a vine to drag himself away from the dense forest. The other old man from the Wallen family did the same. Marnell Sidney and Marnell Sidney chased after the two. Gray also drove the iron-armed barbarian ape to chase after the two. However, the two of them controlled the vines to block the attack, while also allowing the vines to sweep them away. Soon, they disappeared into the depths of the forest. The forest was the Wallen family's main battlefield. If there wasn't a huge difference in strength, it would be very difficult to keep them here. They escaped, but fortunately, we managed to kill Rob Tracy. Just kill Rob Tracy. Without Rob Tracy's assassination skills, the Wallen family would never dare to cause trouble in Sydney. A few hours later, Gray sat on the shoulder of the iron-armed ape and walked back to the Fergus family alone. The Hellhound mercenaries had completed their mission. After the payment was settled, the Hellhound mercenaries left. After Gray, Marnell Sidney, and Marnell Sidney divided the spoils of war, they also left separately. The items obtained from Rob Tracy were divided into 3 parts on the spot. One was a rune portal bag, one was a magic weapon that could control blood fiends, one was a speed magic weapon, and some miscellaneous items that were worth more than 1,000,000 gold coins. Because it was Gray who killed Rob Tracy, Gray had the priority to choose. He chose the magic weapon that could control blood fiends. He already had a rune portal bag, so naturally, there was no need for it. The speed magic weapon was a good way to escape. However, when he obtained the bloodline of a flying blood fiend in the future and had the ability to fly, it wouldn't be very useful. On the other hand, he urgently needed the magic weapon that could control blood fiends. Not only could it increase his combat power, but more importantly, this magic weapon could be handed over to Earl Fergus to manage. The Fergus family was in a very awkward situation. Their combat power was very strong, far surpassing that of an ordinary Earl's family. However, this combat power was concentrated on Gray alone. Apart from Gray, the Fergus family's strength was not even comparable to some of the powerful Viscount families. Once Gray was no longer with the Fergus family, just 2 or 3 ferocious blood warriors would be enough to exterminate the Fergus family. Such a situation was obviously very dangerous. Although the Fergus family was now rich in resources, Bernal and the rest had improved their strength extremely quickly. Bernal was already an upper-level blood warrior, and Caroline, Sarah, and Elise had also become middle-level blood warriors. However, it would obviously take a long time for them to mature. This magic weapon that could control barbarian-level blood fiends could immediately become a combat power. It was a rare choice. With this bracelet, I won't have to worry too much about the Fergus family's safety when I go out in the future. Gray looked at the bracelet on his arm. This was a black bracelet, pure black in color. The surface was carved with the heads of blood fiends, which were the heads of corpse apes. The method of refining this kind of magic weapon has been lost. This must be something from the Empire. I wonder where Rob Tracy got it. Staring at the bracelet, Gray pondered. A huge forest appeared in front of him. It was extremely dense and extended into the distance. There was no way to see the end of the forest. This is the Night Forest? Taking out a map to check, Gray immediately determined that the forest in front of him was the Night Forest that he had been to before. The blood fiends controlled by Rob Tracy were already destroyed in the attack by Marner Sidney and Marnin Sidney. They need to be replenished. Since I'm already here, why not take a trip into the Night Forest and replenish the blood fiends for this bracelet? Gray immediately decided to replenish the blood fiends that the bracelet had lost before returning to the Fergus family. But before that, I have to find a tavern to sleep in and get someone to send a letter to the Fergus family to explain the situation. For the past few days, he had been sleeping in the open, especially when he was following behind Rob Tracy. He didn't even dare to light a fire for fear of being discovered by Rob Tracy. Even with his strong physique, he still felt slightly tired. He decided to find a place to rest for a day. Driving the iron-armed barbarian ape, Gray searched along the Night Forest. He believed that there should be a town at the edge of the forest. Although the Night Forest was dangerous, it also contained endless wealth. There would definitely be a town nearby. Sure enough, after walking for half an hour, a town with a population of about 1,000 or 2,000 appeared in front of him. He drove the iron-armed barbarian ape toward the town. Thump, thump, thump. With the huge body of the iron-armed barbarian ape, there was bound to be a huge commotion wherever it went. The huge commotion immediately alarmed the people in the town. They all walked onto the streets and looked in the direction of the sound. Among them were the residents of the town and the mercenaries who appeared in the town. When they saw the 7-meter-tall, iron-armed barbarian ape, they were immediately terrified. Many of them screamed in fear and ran into the houses to hide. Fortunately, someone quickly noticed Gray sitting on the iron-armed barbarian ape's shoulder and stopped the fear from spreading. They only looked at Gray, who was sitting on the iron-armed barbarian ape's shoulder, with eyes full of reverence, fear, and envy. What a huge blood fiend. It's actually 7 meters tall. Could it be a berserk-level blood fiend, which is even stronger than a murderous-level blood fiend? A young mercenary said in surprise. A berserk-level blood fiend? Ignorant. How can it be a berserk-level blood fiend with such a huge body? If I'm not wrong, it must be a barbarian-level blood fiend. An old mercenary said with a shocked expression. Hiss! Hearing his words, the surrounding people couldn't help but gasp. A barbarian-level blood fiend. It was actually a barbarian-level blood fiend. For ordinary mercenaries like them, the strength of the best among them was only comparable to a low-level blood warrior. A murderous-level blood fiend was enough to kill dozens of people. However, the blood fiend in front of them was actually a barbarian-level blood fiend. If it attacked this town, would everyone in the town be able to withstand it? Pairs of eyes were filled with reverence and fear as they looked at Gray, who was sitting on the iron-armed barbarian ape's shoulder. It seems a little too ostentatious. It was indeed very convenient to travel while sitting on the iron-armed barbarian ape's shoulder. As a result, Gray directly drove the iron-armed barbarian ape into the town. After entering the town, he realized that the commotion caused by this action was a little too big. Forget it, it doesn't matter. Gray didn't care about the gazes of these people. Although he didn't view them as ants, he wouldn't change his mind just because they were afraid of a barbarian-level blood fiend. His attitude towards these people was more of one of indifference. After staying in the town for a night, Gray left the town in high spirits the next day when the sun had already risen high in the sky and set off for the Night Forest. One day later, in the depths of the Night Forest, the iron-armed barbarian ape and the Windrider leopard encountered each other. Realizing that the enemy was too terrifying, The Wind Rider leopard's body turned into an afterimage and quickly fled into the distance. Thump, thump, thump. The iron-armed barbarian ape strode forward. Every step it took was at least a dozen meters long, as if a giant was running. After a few steps, it blocked the Wind Rider leopard's path and threw a punch at it. Crack! The fist, which was as thick as a water tank, suddenly smashed into the Wind Rider leopard's body. The Wind Rider leopard's bones were shattered and it was sent flying. After smashing through many trees, it fell to the ground with large mouthfuls of blood flowing out of its mouth. Gray stepped forward and killed it completely. He then used his ability to control corpses to control it. Soon, it stumbled and stood up after encountering a storm. Reverse nurturing. Using the reverse nurturing ability, a large amount of green light gathered and the Wind Rider leopard's serious injuries quickly healed and disappeared. Because of the need to treat its injuries, Gray handed over the control of the iron-armed barbarian ape to the demonic weapon. He would personally control the blood fiends that were killed so that it would be more convenient for him to use reverse nurturing. An ox-type blood fiend, a bear-type blood fiend, and a Wind Rider leopard. With this, I have a total of 3 berserk blood fiends. During the day, he did not encounter a single berserk blood fiend. However, he did encounter several berserk blood fiends. Gray hunted down 3 of the berserk blood fiends and planned to combine them with the copper rhinoceros to form a total of 4 berserk blood fiends. 4 blood fiends would be able to guard a wider area. Therefore, Gray planned to use these blood fiends to guard the castle on a daily basis. When they encountered a strong enemy, these 4 blood fiends would entangle the enemy. It would not be too late to control the corpses of the berserk blood fiends. Chapter 302. After staying in the night forest for 2 more days, Gray's luck was not very good. He encountered quite a few mad-level blood fiends, but not a single barbarian-level blood fiend. Forget it. I'll control 4 mad-level blood fiends for the time being. I'll kill the corpses of the barbarian-level blood fiends when I hunt the corpse-hair ape. After not encountering any barbarian-level blood fiends for 2 consecutive days, Gray decided to give up and return to Fergus Castle directly. Gray had to make a trip to the Thunder Forest in Duke Niam's territory. After all, the corpse-hair ape's bloodline that he longed for was there. The ability to control corpses was the most powerful blood fiend ability he had seen so far. He would not let it go no matter what. After killing the corpse-hair ape and obtaining its blood, he would have to hunt a barbarian-level blood fiend to control after obtaining the corpse-hair ape's bloodline ability. When the time came, he would just have to kill 1 more blood fiend. Gray, you're back. After Rob Tracy was killed, the aristocratic families temporarily staying in Fergus Castle had already left. Under the escort of the Fergus family, Gray returned to Fergus Castle. Gray, did you really kill Rob Tracy? Bernal asked Gray impatiently as soon as he sat down. Earl Fergus, Sarah, Caroline, and the rest also looked at Gray curiously. Rob Tracy had been killed, and it was Gray who had killed him. This news was spread by the Marquis family of Sydney. Now, this news had spread throughout Sydney territory. After hearing this news, they heaved a sigh of relief, but at the same time, they could not help but be extremely shocked. Rob Tracy's death was like a stone that had been weighing on their hearts had finally been lifted. From now on, they would no longer have to worry about the threat posed by Rob Tracy. But what they really did not expect was that the one who killed Rob Tracy was actually Gray. Who was Rob Tracy? He was the culprit behind the chaos in Sydney, the leader of the Shadow Snakes, and the powerful barbarian blood warrior. However, such an existence was actually killed by Gray. This caused them to be extremely shocked. I was the one who killed him. However, he was already heavily injured at that time. His battle prowess couldn't be compared to a true barbarian blood warrior. Gray explained. Even so, it's already very impressive. After all, he's a barbarian blood warrior. Caroline's beautiful eyes were filled with amazement. That's right. Even if he's injured, he's still a barbaric blood warrior. Sarah's eyes were filled with admiration and pride. Indeed, even if he is heavily injured, he is still a barbarian blood warrior. Earl Fergus smiled and nodded. Over the past few days, he had been in a good mood. Because Gray had killed Rob Tracy, many nobles had sent him letters to befriend him. The letters were full of compliments. Even some of the nobles who had been indifferent to the Fergus family suddenly became enthusiastic. Gray smiled and didn't take it too seriously. Killing Rob Tracy was indeed due to external factors. He didn't rely on his own strength to kill him. In his opinion, it wasn't something to be proud of. However, since Earl Fergus and the rest were rather happy, he let them be. He took out the rune space bag and the magic weapon from the bracelet and handed it to Earl Fergus. "Father, this is for you." "This is?" Earl Fergus reached out to take it and looked at Gray in confusion. "This is Rob Tracy's magic weapon that can control blood fiends." Gray said, "What? A magic weapon that can control blood fiends?" Bernal, Caroline, Sarah, and the rest couldn't help but look at the black bracelet in Earl Fergus's hand. They couldn't take their eyes off it, and their eyes were full of curiosity. They all knew that Gray had a magic weapon that could control blood fiends, but they had never seen it before. Now they finally saw it, although it wasn't the one that Gray had. After killing Rob Tracy, his belongings were divided among me, Lord Marner, and Lord Marner. I obtained this magic weapon. Gray released 4 more berserk-level blood fiends, causing the originally spacious room to suddenly become much more crowded. "Father, I'll let you control this magic weapon to guard the castle. After a while, I'll go out to hunt a barbarian-level blood fiend for backup. Use these 4 berserk-level blood fiends to guard the castle. When you encounter a strong enemy, control the barbarian-level blood fiends to fight." Okay. Earl Fergus didn't decline. Instead, he nodded solemnly and put the bracelet on his left hand. Although the Fergus family was now an Earl's family, other than Gray, there was a huge gap between them and the Earl's family in other aspects, especially the castle's defense. If Gray were to leave, it would simply exist in name only. The castle's defense did indeed need to be strengthened, so he didn't decline. Buzz! As the power of blood was poured into the bracelet, a black light flickered. Earl Fergus suddenly felt an inexplicable connection between himself and the 4 berserk-level blood fiends. He tried to control the Windrider leopard to walk closer. Immediately, he saw the 3-meter-long Windrider leopard walk over as if it was controlling its own arm. It was so easy and casual. He was inexplicably excited. With 4 berserk-level blood fiends under his control, how strong was his combat strength now? Even if he was facing Count Smalley, he now had the confidence to face him. So what if you're a berserk warrior? If you have the ability, fight with my 4 berserk-level blood fiends. In the dead of night, 2 hot bodies were entangled together under the blankets. After a long time, they finally stopped. The next day, Gray caressed Barbara's sleeping face and woke up in high spirits. After his usual training, Gray left Fergus Castle and entered Fergus City. In the south of Fergus City, there was a large residence that occupied a large area. That was where the Red Wing was stationed. Since moving the Red Wing to Smalley City, Gray rarely went to the Red Wing. He was only responsible for providing protection to the Red Wing. As for how the Red Wing was run and what kind of missions it accepted, those were the matters of the mercenary group leader. He wouldn't interfere. Young Master Gray, hearing Gray's arrival, the slender and beautiful Alice, dressed in a red battle suit, rushed over. Beside her, there was a black-haired girl. The girl was dressed in a black and white battle suit. Her black hair was tied into a ponytail, and her face had a heroic spirit. She was the daughter of the former Red Wing leader, Haley Hewlett. Her forehead was slightly sweaty. She must have been practicing blood techniques just now. Yes. Gray smiled and nodded to the two, and then said to Alice, "Thank you for the Hellhound mercenaries last time. No need. We're also very happy to be able to help you. Besides, we also received a considerable commission from Sir Mantle." Alice smiled. In a room, Gray summoned the Red Wing's higher-ups, including the leader. "I'm preparing to set off for Duke Neum's Thunder Forest in a few days. As for the specific location of the Corpse Hair Ape, I need you to send someone to lead the way." Gray glanced at the Red Wing's higher-ups. "Of course, if you want to enter the Thunder Forest to hunt blood fiends, you can also come with me. Young Master Gray, can we also go with you?" Alice looked at Gray in surprise. What was the strength of young Master Gray in front of them? A powerful berserker who could control a barbaric-level blood fiend and follow him into the forest to hunt blood fiends. Although it was not absolutely safe, it was definitely much safer than entering the forest by themselves. Moreover, with his current strength, the blood fiends he wanted to hunt were at least to the berserker level. Ordinary murderous-level blood fiends were certainly not worthy of his attention. Even a little of them was enough to make the Red Wing a fortune. Yes, of course, I can only bring elites. After all, the blood fiends in the area I'm going to go deep into are more powerful. Gray nodded. Although he would not follow the Red Wing on missions, he did not mind bringing the Red Wing along if he could. Young Master Gray, please let us go with you, Hobbs said with a happy expression. He naturally saw the benefits of following Gray to hunt blood fiends. Well then, you guys get ready. We'll set off in 3 days. Gray nodded in agreement. 3 days later, Gray set off for Duke Niam's territory. Following him were more than 30 elite mercenaries of the Red Wing. Among them, Gray unexpectedly saw Haley Hewlett, the daughter of the former head of the Red Wing. She was dressed in black and white combat attire and looked valiant and formidable. Thinking that she practiced blood techniques, her strength naturally could not be too weak. After more than 10 days of hurrying, the team entered Duke Niam's territory and arrived at a prosperous town with a population of thousands. It took quite a long time, but along the way, Gray cultivated twice a day in the morning and evening and did not delay his cultivation because of this. The town was adjacent to Thunder Forest, so there were many mercenaries and mercenary corps coming and going. In the town, mercenaries could be seen walking around from time to time. They found a tavern called Blaze Tavern to stay and prepared to leave their horses and carriages there. Hey, aren't you the Red Wing? As soon as they entered the tavern, a joking voice was heard. Gray looked over and saw that in the right corner of the tavern, there were a total of 10 tables occupied by a group of mercenaries. Most of these mercenaries were wearing leather armor, and a few of them were wearing war attire. However, without exception, there was a scorpion mark on their chests. Obviously, they were from the same mercenary corps. Among them, there were 4 men sitting around a table, all of them wearing war attire. The one who spoke just now was a middle-aged man with a broad face and a rather burly appearance. The man was tall with broad shoulders and carried a heavy axe on his back. He was looking at the Red Wing members with a joking gaze. This is the leader of the Black Scorpion. He once had a conflict with the Red Wing. Seeing these people, Alice frowned slightly and whispered to Gray, "I heard that your leader is dead. Is that true?" The middle-aged man took a sip of wine, exhaled a breath of alcohol, and asked playfully. Hobbs seemed to be a little afraid of the strength of the Black Scorpion leader. "Our previous leader has indeed passed away. I am now the leader of the Red Wing." "That guy is really dead? And he made you a ferocious blood warrior, the leader?" The middle-aged man's face flashed with undisguised contempt. His gaze swept across the Red Wing members and fell on Gray. He only glanced at Gray, thinking that Gray was just an employer of the Red Wing. However, when his gaze fell on Alice and Haley Hewlett, a hint of passion flashed in his eyes, and he stopped. "The Red Wing has no future. Do you two want to join our Black Scorpion?" Chapter 303. Haha, the leader is right. The Red Wing has no future. Leave as soon as possible. Come to our Black Scorpion. Our leader will take special care of you. Hee. As long as you follow our leader, you will benefit. Hearing their leader's invitation to Alice and Haley, the mercenaries of the Black Scorpion Mercenary Corps immediately jeered, each of their tones more vulgar than the last. "Bastard, you? Say it again, if you have the guts." Hearing their own mercenary group being looked down upon and the women of their mercenary group being teased, the Red Wing mercenaries were furious. They clenched their fists so tightly that cracking sounds could be heard. Don't be provoked by them. Hobbs reached out his hand to stop the angry Red Wing mercenaries who wanted to pounce on them. He looked at the Black Scorpion leader and said in a deep voice, "Leader Dryden, you are belittling the Red Wing in front of me. Isn't that too much? Belittle? Am I?" Dryden, the leader of the Black Scorpion mercenaries, smiled. "The strongest member of the Red Wing is the ferocious blood warrior. Don't you know what you are like? Do you need me to belittle you?" Saying this, he looked at Alice and Haley. The passion in his eyes could not be concealed. So, have you thought it over? Among the mercenaries, women were very rare, and beautiful women were even rarer. There were actually two beautiful female mercenaries in the Red Wing. He could not help but feel aroused. Feeling the naked desire in the black scorpion leader Dryden's eyes, Haley was so angry that her face turned ashen. But when she thought of the black scorpion's strength, she gritted her teeth and endured it. Now that she no longer had a father who sheltered her from the wind and rain, she must learn to be patient and learn not to cause trouble for the mercenary group. Pulling Haley Hewlett behind her, Alice said coldly, "Thank you for your kindness, Leader Dryden, but we have no plans to switch to the Black Scorpion. Won't you reconsider?" Dryden, the leader of the Black Scorpion, said in a playful tone. "No need," Alice said with a cold face. "Is that so? That's a pity." The captain of the Black Scorpion, Dryden, shook his head and glanced at the two slender figures with a regretful expression. "What a pity. Following the Red Wing, you're doomed to have no future." As he spoke, a cold glint flashed across his eyes. After the meal, the members of the Red Wing returned to their hotel rooms. In one of the rooms, Gray and the higher-ups of the Red Wing gathered. "Leader, the Black Scorpion mercenaries are monitoring us," a mercenary said. "The Black Scorpion is obviously up to no good. I'm worried that they will attack us after we enter the forest." Another mercenary said worriedly, "What is the conflict between the Black Scorpion and the Red Wing?" Gray asked doubtfully. "We've met them before when we were hunting in the forest. They wanted to snatch the berserk blood fiends that we killed. However, the old leader was still around at that time, so they didn't succeed. They had a grudge against each other," Alice said. "Young Master Gray, the Black Scorpion has two ferocious blood warriors besides their leader, who is a berserk warrior. If they really attack us, we definitely won't be their match." Hobbs looked at them and said in a deep voice, "It's okay." Gray shook his head. "If they really attack us in the forest, I'll intervene." The Black Scorpion was quite powerful. They had one berserk warrior and two ferocious blood warriors. They were not inferior to the Red Wing. However, in his opinion, they were just SOSO. Even if he didn't use the berserk blood fiends, he was confident that he could deal with them. If they didn't provoke him, he wouldn't bother with them. However, if the Black Scorpion attacked them, he wouldn't mind exterminating the Black Scorpion while he was at it. With Gray's assurance, the mercenaries of the Red Wing heaved a sigh of relief. Although they didn't see the berserk blood fiends, they saw how Gray killed the leader of the Mantis mercenary regiment. They knew that the blood fiends were extremely powerful. In the afternoon, Gray left the tavern and walked into the town streets. Alice and Haley were with him. Alice originally wanted to take Haley out to relax and relieve her depression. However, when she heard that Gray was going out, she requested to go along. The combination of a noble young master and two beautiful mercenaries was quite eye-catching. From time to time, they would attract attention. The three of them walked along the town streets and stopped in front of stalls from time to time. The town was adjacent to the Thunder Forest. Occasionally, rare ores and medicinal herbs would appear. If they were lucky, they might be able to buy them at a very low price. It wasn't impossible to become rich overnight. A few days ago, Gray read a travel book. The book mentioned that someone had found an extremely rare metal, or that could be used to refine silver-level weapons, and became rich overnight. Now that they were in the town outside the Thunder Forest, Gray couldn't help but want to give it a try and see if he could find something good. He didn't want to become rich overnight. At his level, killing a berserk blood fiend would net him a profit of tens of thousands of gold coins. To become rich overnight, he would have to earn at least 1,000,000 gold coins. The difficulty of this task was a little high. After turning a few streets, the three of them passed by a stall. On the stall, there was an old tree root that was about a foot long. The old tree's roots were dark red in color with winding roots. It was as vigorous as a dragon, making one feel that it was extraordinary at first glance. The three of them couldn't help but squat down to examine it carefully. There was an old man in front of the stall. The old man was dressed in plain clothes and had a white goatee on his chin. He looked quite amiable. Seeing that Gray and the others were interested in the item he was selling, he immediately introduced it with a smile. "You three have good eyesight. You can tell at a glance that my item is extraordinary. To tell you the truth, this is an extremely rare magic herb called blood dragon root. Blood dragon root? Is that the rumored magic herb that grows after being stained with the blood of a dragon king or above? Haley looked at the old man in surprise. She had once heard from her father that the blood dragon root was an extremely precious magic herb. It was rumored that it grew from roots that were stained with the blood of a dragon king or above. Dragon beasts had long lifespans. Those above Dragon King could even live up to several thousand years. The blood dragon root also had the effect of prolonging one's lifespan. It was extremely precious. She didn't expect to come across one here. Moreover, it was so long. Yes, it's the blood dragon root. I obtained it by chance. I'm old now. Originally, I want to keep it for my own use. Unfortunately, I'm too short on money, so I can only sell it. The old man said with a pained expression, "If you want it, I can sell it to you for 10,000 gold coins." 10,000 gold coins? Haley couldn't help but be tempted. She could take out 10,000 gold coins. Such a long blood dragon root was sold for 10,000 gold coins. If she could buy it and sell it, she would definitely be able to earn several times more. No need. At this moment, Gray stood up and shook his head slightly at Alice and Haley. Seeing Gray's reaction, Alice and Haley immediately understood that there must be a problem with the blood dragon root. They immediately stood up and prepared to leave. Don't go. 9,000 gold coins. No, 8,000 gold coins, 6,000 gold coins. I can't go any lower. Seeing the three of them stand up and leave without looking back, the old man suddenly panicked and took the initiative to lower the price. Your blood dragon root is too precious. You'd better keep it for yourself. Gray stopped and looked back at the old man with a playful voice. After the three of them walked away, Haley couldn't help but ask, "Young Master Gray, what's wrong with this blood dragon root?" A real blood dragon root will have a scale-like old skin on the surface. It looks like the scales of a dragon beast, but this one doesn't have it at all. If I'm not wrong, it should be the root of a mangrove tree. It's not worth much. Gray explained. He could see that although there were people who became rich overnight, there were obviously more people who were fooled. If one didn't have the corresponding eyesight, they would only vomit blood. Continuing to stroll forward, Gray's eyes stopped in front of a stall after turning a corner. This was a very simple stall, with only a piece of leather covering the ground. There were a total of a dozen things on the stall. The things were very messy. There were stones, herbs, and metal pieces. In front of the stall, there was a young man in his 20s. The young man was wearing leather armor and should be a mercenary. What attracted Gray's attention was a silver metal ball on the stall. The metal ball was round and was about the size of a ping-pong ball. Looking at the material, it was very similar to the silver metal ball he obtained last time. This made him squint his eyes. The last time, the silver metal ball was only the size of a thumb, but he exchanged it for a rune space bag with 1,000 cubic meters from the ghost merchant. Now, this silver metal ball was the size of a ping-pong ball. If it was really made of that kind of metal, what precious things could it be exchanged for? What kind of mine is this? Gray walked over quietly and squatted in front of the stall. He pointed at a metal mine and asked, "I picked it up in the forest. I don't know. If young master wants it, I'll give you 10 silver coins." The young mercenary raised his head and glanced at Gray. Seeing that Gray's clothes were obviously of high grade, his eyes immediately lit up and he said enthusiastically, "Okay, I'll take it. What about this one?" Gray pointed at an unknown stone and asked, 5 silver coins. "I'll take it too." Gray casually picked up the silver metal ball and weighed it. It was very light in his hand. Gray was almost certain that this silver metal ball was the same material as the one he obtained last time. "What about this one?" Gray asked casually. "Well, this one, 20 silver coins." Because Gray had already chosen 2 things from his stall, the young man only thought that Gray was a rich young master who was spending money to buy something rare. He didn't see that Gray was specifically looking for the silver metal ball. He gave a price that he thought was reasonable. "I'll take it too." After buying a few more things, he managed to get a gold coin in total. After receiving the leather wrapped in these things, Gray stood up and prepared to leave. But at this moment, a young man's voice suddenly sounded. "I'll take this silver metal ball. Name a price." Chapter 304. On the street, Gray, Alice, and Haley's path was blocked by a group of people. They were led by two young men who were 2 or 3 years apart in age. One of them had fair skin and a handsome face. He was wearing a luxurious purple noble costume. His head was slightly raised, and there was a sense of arrogance in his body. This was the person who spoke just now. At this moment, his eyes were fixed on the leather wrapped in the silver metal ball in Gray's hand, and there was a trace of burning passion in the depths of his eyes. Next to him was a young man wearing a blue noble costume. He was a little older than the former, with a handsome face and deep eyes. There was a noble temperament that came from the inside out. Behind the two, there were 5 people who were all wearing battle suits, and the 2 young men seemed to be the leaders. Gray glanced at the group of people. From the way they dressed, he could tell that the 2 young men were not simple people. If he was not mistaken, they should be the children of noble families, and their status was probably not low. Not only because of their clothes, but also because they were also eyeing the silver metal ball. What was the silver metal ball? Gray did not know, but if it was something that a mysterious powerhouse like the ghost merchant wanted, it must be something of great value. The fact that they were eyeing the silver metal ball meant that they knew the value of the silver metal ball. But he did not know if they knew the value of the silver metal ball itself, or if they knew that the silver metal ball could attract the ghost merchant to exchange for something of great value. Of course, even if he knew that the 2 young men were not simple people, he could not sell such a precious thing. This thing is not for sale, Gray said calmly. I said I want it. Name a price. The purple-clothed young man glared at him. His face revealed a trace of coldness, and his voice revealed an unquestionable tone. Sorry, I like this thing very much, and I don't plan to sell it to others. The young man in purple's tough attitude made Gray frown slightly, but thinking that the 2 young men were not simple people, and that they were not in Sydney now, he finally endured and said, 1,000 gold coins. I'll take it for 1,000 gold coins. The young man in purple did not seem to hear Gray's refusal at all, and said to himself, I said I'm not for sale. Gray's face could not help but become a little cold. The young man's tough attitude made him even more dissatisfied. What's going on there? It seems like there's a conflict between 2 nobles. The sudden conflict immediately attracted the attention of many people. In this small town, there was no lack of mercenaries, and mercenaries love to be lively. The young mercenary from earlier was also there. When he saw another noble trying to force Gray to sell the silver metal ball for 1,000 gold coins, he regretted it so much that his intestines turned green. He actually sold something that was worth at least 1,000 gold coins for 20 silver coins. However, he also knew that these 2 groups of people were all nobles and were not people he could afford to offend. He could only be filled with resentment and did not dare to go back on his word with Gray. Behind Gray, Alice and Haley couldn't help but frown. By now, they roughly understood what had happened. It was likely that Gray had bought something extremely valuable, and this item had caught the eye of the noble youth opposite him, who wanted to buy it by force. This hesitation made the 2 of them slightly worried. Although Gray's strength was not weak, judging from the way he dressed, the 2 nobles in front of him were probably not simple. Give him 1,000 gold coins and take it. The purple-clothed young man raised his eyebrows, coldly sizing up Gray, and ordered in a cold voice. Whoosh! As soon as he finished speaking, one of the 5 people behind him suddenly dashed out like a ferocious blood beast, pouncing towards Gray. This was a middle-aged man who was not weak. He arrived in front of Gray in an instant, his hands forming eagle claws as he tried to grab the leather wrapped around the silver metal ball in Gray's hand. So fast. Vicious blood warrior. This person is a vicious blood warrior. A few mercenaries with good eyesight immediately revealed astonished expressions. The strength of a vicious blood warrior could definitely be considered an expert in this small town where mercenaries congregated. Who would have thought that a random follower of the 2 young nobles would have the strength of a vicious blood warrior? One could well imagine that these 2 young nobles' identities were not simple. The other noble is going to be at a disadvantage. He actually only brought 2 female mercenaries with him. Some mercenaries looked expectantly at Gray. They were a group of people who licked blood from their blades and feared chaos. At this moment, They were all jeering, hoping that a vicious blood warrior would jump out from behind Gray and have a great battle with a vicious blood warrior opposite them, allowing them to feast their eyes. However, when they saw what was behind Gray, they could not help but be greatly disappointed. Other than the two female mercenaries behind Gray, there was no one else. The two female mercenaries were rather good-looking, and they really knew how to enjoy themselves by his side to serve him. It was a pity that they were of no use at this time. There were female experts among the vicious blood warriors, but they were obviously very rare. They did not think that these two female mercenaries were either of them. The middle-aged man's hands formed eagle claws, whistling through the air. It looked like he was about to snatch away the leather in Gray's hand. "Ha!" Suddenly, the middle-aged man's outstretched hand stopped a few centimeters away from the leather. A pair of slender and fair hands grabbed his wrist, stopping his hand from continuing forward. The middle-aged man's expression changed when his hand was grabbed. His hand trembled violently, wanting to break free from the hand that was grabbing him. However, he discovered that his hand was as if it was clamped by an iron clamp, unable to move at all. He could not help but feel a chill in his heart. He knew that the young man in front of him was not simple. His other hand clenched into a fist and punched out like a heavy cannon. Kacha! Just as the fist smashed down, a crisp sound suddenly rang out. The middle-aged man's face instantly twitched. The bones in his wrist had been crushed. Gritting his teeth, he continued to punch out with his other fist, hoping to force the other party to dodge and save his hand. However, in the next moment, his entire body flew up. Gray grabbed his broken hand, lifted it up abruptly, and flung it to the ground. Bang! He fell heavily on the stone floor, causing the stone floor to crack and splatter. Waves of pain came from his back, and he could clearly hear the sound of bones breaking in his body. His face twisted again, and he was in so much pain that cold sweat broke out on his forehead. "I've already said that I'm not selling it. Are you still going to force me to sell it?" Gray's eyes were cold as he looked at the purple-clothed young man. Although he was wary of the other party's background, he was not to the point where he would swallow his anger and give up the silver medal ball. Seeing that his follower was in so much pain that he could not get up, the young man in purple had a frosty expression on his face as he said coldly, "There's nothing that I can't buy when I want to buy it. Break whichever hand he injured." The last sentence was obviously said to his follower behind him. Whoosh! Behind the young man in purple, an old man in his 50s pounced toward Gray. The old man was skinny, as if he was only skin and bones. He took a step forward and was already in front of Gray. He stretched out one hand and formed a palm knife, chopping toward Gray's wrist. Whoosh! The old man's withered hand actually brought about a sharp whistling sound, as if it was not a withered hand that was chopping down, but a real sharp knife. Gray's eyes suddenly turned cold. He faced the old man's palm knife and also chopped out with a palm knife. Bang! There was a violent collision as Gray's hand and the old man's hand collided. Both of their sleeves were torn to shreds with a sizzling sound. The ground beneath their feet also began to crack, one after another. In the next moment, the old man's expression changed. He suddenly retreated and could not help but look at his arm. On his withered, iron-like arm, there was actually a clear blood stain. Gray's 5 fingers were long and slender, and his arm was fair, as if it was carved out of jade. One could not help but worry that it would break like jade. However, what was surprising was that after colliding with the old man's arm, Gray's arm was not injured at all. It was like a flawless jade. The ground is cracked? Isn't this strength a bit too exaggerated? What is the strength of these two people? Berserker. These two are definitely berserkers like our captain. The surrounding mercenaries, among which there was no lack of large mercenary groups with outstanding eyesight, immediately cried out in surprise. What? That old man is a berserker? Who is that group of people to actually be able to have a berserker protect them? That noble young master is also a berserker? Such a young berserker. What family does this noble young master come from? Those who heard it could not help but be shocked. Berserkers, in their eyes, were definitely formidable experts. They did not expect that there would be 2 of them. But what surprised them even more was that the background of both sides was not simple. One side could drive a berserker to protect them, and the other side was already a berserker at a young age. Young master, you can do it. Old man, you can do it. Of course, they did not care about these. What kind of background did the two sides have, and whose background was stronger? They did not particularly care. They were more concerned about the battle at this moment. A battle at the level of a berserker was rare. After all, that kind of existence was very rare among the mercenaries, and even rarer to fight. This made them extremely excited, and they stared at the two of them with great interest. Many people were even more afraid that it would not be chaotic, shouting words like, "Young master, old man, you can do it." The old man's face darkened. A man in his 50s actually suffered a loss in the hands of a young man in his 20s. He could not help but feel ashamed. Whiz! His eyes flashed with a trace of coldness, and his figure was like a bolt of lightning, once again pouncing towards Gray. "Stop!" At this moment, a voice suddenly sounded. From the beginning to the end, there was no sound. 15_15674/ Chapter 305. Following the words of the young man in blue noble attire, the old man stopped and retreated to distance himself from Gray. The young man in blue noble attire looked at Gray with a slightly apologetic expression and said sincerely, "Sorry, we don't have any malicious intentions. We just like the silver metal ball in your hand too much and want to buy it from you. Of course, the price is negotiable. I've already said that I'm not selling this thing." Gray looked deeply at the young man in blue noble attire and said, "Understood. Please rest assured, we won't bother you anymore." The young man in blue noble attire smiled apologetically again and said in a carefree manner, "Big brother," but next to him, the young man in purple attire was anxious and hurriedly wanted to speak, but he was stopped by the young man in blue noble attire. "Say no more." The young man in purple attire seemed to be unwilling, but he was still stopped by the young man in blue noble attire. It could be seen that the young man in blue noble attire had a lot of prestige. The injured middle-aged man was helped up. Under the guidance of a young man in blue noble attire, the group of people left and appeared on another street. "Big brother, that silver metal ball must be the thing recorded in the family's book collection." Walking to this street, the young man in purple attire suddenly anxiously said, "I know." The young man in blue noble attire faintly nodded. "Then why did you—" The young man in purple attire was anxious. This person is not simple. He has the strength of a berserker in his 20s. The other party should be from a big family. The young man in blue noble attire calmly said. "But let it go like this." The young man in purple attire was unwilling. "Of course we can't let it go." The young man in blue noble attire's eyes suddenly turned cold. "That silver metal ball is of great use to the family. We must get it." "Big brother, you mean?" The young man in purple attire's eyes suddenly lit up. "There are too many people in the town. It's inconvenient to make a move. Next to it is the Thunder Forest. I think you should enter the Thunder Forest. It won't be too late to make a move then." The young man in blue noble attire coldly said. Discarding all the other minerals, Gray slightly frowned and put away the silver metal ball alone. Although he had obtained the small silver ball, there had been some disturbances. This was something he had not expected. "Young Master Gray, what exactly is this silver metal ball?" Seeing Gray put away the silver metal ball, Alice and Haley asked curiously. "I don't know exactly what it is, but someone wants it. You can exchange it for something extremely valuable." "I'm afraid that group of people won't give up just like that," Alice whispered. She could see that the two young noblemen were determined to get the silver metal ball. The only reason they gave up was probably because there were too many people in the town, and it was not convenient to snatch it by force. "I know." Gray nodded. Naturally, he could see that the young man in blue noble clothing was not what he appeared to be. If the other party wanted to stop his subordinates from robbing, he would have done so when the first person tried to do so. However, the other party waited for the second person to fight with him, and when he had already displayed the strength of a berserker, before speaking up to stop him. Clearly, it wasn't that the other party didn't want to snatch it, but because of external factors, they changed their decision at the last minute. "That group of people will probably attack us in the Thunder Forest," Haley said with a frown. Although she was young, She once had a father with the strength of a berserker. She didn't know how much she had heard about all kinds of darkness. Naturally, she wouldn't simply think that the other party had given up. It's fine. It's fine if they don't attack us in the Thunder Forest, but if they attack us in the Thunder Forest, I'll let them know the consequences. Gray's eyes were slightly cold. To be able to have a berserker follow and protect them, the power behind the other party was definitely not weak. However, he wasn't really afraid of them. His strength was already extremely close to a berserker's, and with the Iron Arm Barbarian Ape in his rune space bag, even if the one attacking was a berserker, he wouldn't be afraid. Moreover, he didn't believe that the other party had a berserker following and protecting them. A berserker was an expert at that level. In any family, they would be the object of worship. It was almost impossible for them to do the work of a guard. They rested in the tavern for a day, leaving the carriage and horses in the tavern. On the second day, more than 30 people from the Red Wing, including Gray, left the town and headed towards the Thunder Forest. Like Gray and the others, there were many mercenaries and even mercenary teams that took advantage of the early morning to enter the Thunder Forest. The Thunder Forest was dangerous, but was also full of wealth. There were many people who obtained rare herbs or ores to become rich. Almost every day, many mercenaries were attracted to the Thunder Forest. The Black Scorpion's people are also here. Among the mercenaries, Gray discovered the Black Scorpion's people. They were led by the leader of the Black Scorpion, Dryden. They had slightly more people than the Red Wing, with a total of 40 people. Of course, this wasn't all of the Black Scorpion's people. If there were no surprises, these people should be the same as the Red Wings, the elites of the Black Scorpion. The Thunder Forest was an extremely vast forest. The terrain inside was complicated. There were swamps, basins, hills, and mountain ranges. The reason why it was called the Thunder Forest was because in the depths of the forest, there was an area that was covered by lightning all year round. Thunder and lightning intersected there. From time to time, there would be zigzagging lightning strikes. Looking from afar, it was extremely frightening. This was why it was called the Thunder Forest. Arriving outside the Thunder Forest, numerous mercenaries swarmed into the Thunder Forest, creating a clamor of noise. As they went deeper into the Thunder Forest, the number of mercenaries that were traveling with them gradually decreased. After a few miles, there were no more mercenaries that were traveling with them. The Thunder Forest was simply too big. Even though there were many mercenaries that entered this time, they were scattered in the Thunder Forest. It was like a handful of pebbles mixed into a beach. Gray and the rest of the Red Wings mercenary group headed towards the location of the corpse-hair ape with a clear goal in mind. They didn't kill any of the beasts they encountered along the way. They only stopped to pick some rare medicinal herbs when they came across them. After walking for dozens of miles, they were already close to the area where the blood fiends were active. Normally, mercenaries would stop here. However, for Gray and the Red Wing, this was just the beginning. Pitter-patter, patter, patter. Suddenly, dense footsteps were heard. In front and behind of Gray and the Red Wings group, there were people rushing out from the dense forest, blocking their path in front and behind. These people were either wearing battle armor or leather armor. However, without exception, there was a Black Scorpion symbol on their chest. This was the symbol of the Black Scorpion. Among them, the one who was facing them was a middle-aged man with a broad face and a burly body. He was carrying a heavy axe on his back. It looked quite heavy, but the middle-aged man didn't seem to feel it all. Captain Dryden, what is the meaning of this? Looking at the Black Scorpion blocking their path, Hobbs's face darkened as he scolded. What I mean? Don't tell me you don't understand. Captain Dryden of the Black Scorpion sneered. Back then, your Red Wing stole my Black Scorpion's prey. It's time to settle this score. Captain Dryden, aren't you twisting words and forcing logic? Back then, it was clearly your Black Scorpion who wanted to steal our prey. However, you didn't succeed. How is it that we stole your prey now? Hobbs said angrily. If I say that your Red Wing stole it, then your Red Wing definitely stole it. Captain Dryden of the Black Scorpion said in a domineering voice. As he spoke, his gaze swept across the members of the Red Wings mercenary group and landed on Alice and Haley. His eyes burned with passion as he spoke. I'll give the two of you one last chance. Join my Black Scorpion and become my women. Otherwise, I'm sure you know the consequences. Now that they were not in the tavern, he no longer concealed his possessiveness towards the two. In your dreams, Alice's face was cold, while Haley's face was ashen. This person was about the same age as her father, yet he actually dared to ask her to become his woman. He was simply shameless. Looks like you're in luck. Captain Dryden of the Black Scorpion's expression turned cold as he spoke playfully to the Black Scorpion mercenaries surrounding him. The Black Scorpion mercenaries all stared at Alice and Haley with blazing eyes. Their gazes wandered between their towering breasts and slender waists. Hee hee, thank you, boss. Captain, have a taste first. We'll be right behind you. Captain Dryden of the Black Scorpion shifted his gaze from Alice and Haley to Gray. Young master, this is a matter between my Black Scorpion and the Red Wing. I can let you go. Captain Dryden of the Black Scorpion said after a slight pause. But please hand over the silver metal ball. Silver metal ball? Gray looked at Captain Dryden of the Black Scorpion in surprise. He did not expect the other party to also have designs on the silver metal ball. Could it be that he was also present yesterday? However, he quickly reacted and asked, "Did those two noble brothers instruct you to do this?" Looks like you understand. Since that's the case, it's better for you to hand it over yourself. You're a noble after all. It wouldn't be good if you were injured. Captain Dryden of the Black Scorpion sneered. With just your men? Gray had a disdainful expression. So what if I'm included? The Black Scorpion mercenaries made way for an old man to walk out. The old man was dressed in gray armor and carried a spear on his back. His body emitted a cold aura. Chapter 306. It's him. Seeing the person who appeared, Alice and Haley's expressions changed slightly. They had seen this person before. It was the old man who followed the two young nobles and fought with Gray. Alice, who is this person? Seeing Alice and Haley's expressions change abruptly after the old man appeared, Hobbs hurriedly asked, I don't know who he is, but yesterday this person fought with young Master Gray. He has the strength of a berserker. Strength of a berserker? Hobbs and even the Red Wing mercenaries who heard this couldn't help but change their expressions slightly. Gray was powerful and stronger than ordinary berserkers. Fighting with the Black Scorpion leader Dryden, they believed that the final winner would be Gray. But at this time, in addition to the Black Scorpion leader Dryden, there was actually another berserker. In other words, Gray would have to face the siege of two berserkers. They couldn't help but worry. In the same realm, it was rare to hear of someone who could fight against two and win. Perhaps there was such an existence in the Duke's family or the royal family. But if it was said that Gray was such an existence, they didn't quite believe it. In the end, Gray was only a descendant of a Duke's family. Compared to these families, the gap between his family's background was too big. Not only in the power of blood techniques, but also in the grade of magic weapons, the gap between them was too big. Although Gray had an astonishing battle record and had once killed a barbarian blood warrior, but that was after all a heavily injured barbarian blood warrior. It was completely possible for a heavily injured barbarian blood warrior to be weaker than a berserker. It's you. Seeing the old man who suddenly appeared, Gray's expression didn't panic, but he couldn't help but ridicule. If I didn't remember wrongly yesterday, your young master should have said that he wouldn't bother me anymore, right? Now that things have come to this, is there any use in saying this? The old man sneered. Is that so? And what you said is really like farts. Gray had a mocking expression. You dare to insult our young master. The old man's eyebrows trembled, his expression cold, and his body emitted a cold and dangerous, murderous aura. What? After doing such a thing, you won't let people talk about it? The mocking expression on Gray's face deepened. Shut up. Our young master isn't someone you can talk about. Whoosh! The old man's killing intent became even more intense, and he suddenly exploded, yelled, bringing a gust of wind. He appeared beside Gray. In each of his left and right hands, there was a metal claw with 3 hooks. Cold light flashed, and spots of cyan light bloomed on them. One in front and one behind, they drew a sharp aura towards Gray. Gray took a small step back and easily dodged the first claw. Then his long sword turned into a flash of lightning and attacked the second claw of the opponent. Let's do it together. The old man's expression became serious. The fight yesterday, and even the fight, just now made him feel that Gray was not simple. He said to the Black Scorpion leader, "Okay." The Black Scorpion leader, Dryden, nodded, took down his battle axe, and pounced on Gray. "Leave the two women, the rest of them," he ordered the Black Scorpion mercenaries as he pounced. Immediately, the Black Scorpion mercenaries, who had been waiting impatiently, surrounded the Red Wing mercenaries. He was prepared to attack the Red Wing today, and the reason why he joined forces with the old man was completely unexpected. The old man somehow knew that he had the intention to attack the Red Wing, so he came to him and wanted to attack the Red Wing together with him. The purpose was to get an item in the other party's hand. Knowing that there was a berserker in the Red Wing, and that it was not as simple as he thought, and that the other party had the same purpose as him, he naturally agreed without hesitation. Of course, he naturally had his own ideas about the item that the other party wanted, but he would not show it now. After all, he still needed the other party to deal with the berserker in the Red Wing with him. Whoosh! The heavy axe turned into a black light, and with great momentum, it was like a black mountain smashing down toward Gray. Crack! Gray retreated to avoid it, and the heavy axe hit the ground, leaving a huge crack more than 10 meters long. The Black Scorpion leader, Dryden, jumped up and pounced on Gray again. On the other side, the old man held a pair of claws, and his claws drew out a piercing blue light, and he quickly closed in on Gray. Gray was besieged by two berserkers. In the midst of the battle, Gray looked in the direction of the Red Wing. Hobbs was besieged by two berserkers and was obviously suppressed. Two bloody wounds had already appeared on his body, but they were not too deep. The other members of the Red Wing were more or less injured. The Black Scorpion had more people than the Red Wing, and many of them were besieged by two people. Hee, I advise you not to resist. It won't be good if there are a few wounds on your face. Don't worry, let us feel comfortable, and we will definitely spare your lives. Alice and Haley were each surrounded by two mercenaries. The Black Scorpion obviously wanted to capture the two of them alive, so they did not attack them ruthlessly, but their words were filthy and their faces were full of lewd smiles. Looks like I have to end this quickly. Having made up his mind, Gray snorted coldly. Whoosh whoosh. Suddenly, 5 emerald green ice wind blades appeared beside him. They turned into 5 streaks of green light and slashed at the Black Scorpion Chief Dryden and the old man, completely covering the area around the two of them. In the blink of an eye, they were already in front of the two of them. So fast, the surroundings were covered by the wind blades, and there was no way to dodge. The Black Scorpion Chief Dryden and the old man's faces were slightly serious. One of them had a battle axe wrapped in black light, while the other had a pair of claws wrapped in blue light. They met the ice wind blade that was coming straight at them, wanting to shatter it. Bang bang! 2 sounds of collisions rang out as the two figures were sent flying dozens of meters away by the spread of frost. If the 5 ice wind blades were to be combined together, they would have the power of a barbarian blood warrior. If they were to be separated, their power would be stronger than a berserker's special ability. Naturally, it was not something that the two of them could withstand. How can it be so powerful? The Black Scorpion Chief Dryden and the old man's faces changed when they were violently sent flying and smashed into 2 trees in the distance. The trees were so big that it would take more than 10 people to wrap their arms around them to encircle them. They had both wind and ice abilities, and they were extremely powerful. They had never seen a blood fiend with such abilities. Crack! The Black Scorpion Chief Dryden used his strength to break the ice. Because of the magic weapon's isolation, he did not come into direct contact with the ice. He was only attacked by the aftershock of the cold air. The ice on his body was not thick, and he quickly broke free. However, the moment he broke free from the ice on his body, his expression changed drastically. In this short moment, Gray had already appeared in front of him. The magic sword in his hand was wrapped in lightning as he slashed at him. Clang! He broke out in cold sweat and used his heavy axe as a shield to block the first strike. However, the heavy axe was swept away by the sword, and the vital part of his heart was completely exposed to Gray's sword. Gray's eyes were cold. The blue and white lightning on his long sword flickered, and it was like a bolt of lightning descending from the sky as it pierced his chest. He tried to dodge in fear, but it was too late. The long sword pierced his chest. Poof! The long sword was pulled out. There was no blood splattering, only a charred chest. The black scorpion chief Dryden's eyes were wide open, filled with unwillingness and fear. He was killed by Gray before he could even use his blood fiend ability. The huge gap in strength made it so that he did not even have the chance to use his blood fiend ability. Chief, the sudden turn of events caused the expressions of the black scorpion mercenaries, who were originally attacking the Red Wing with a sinister smile, to change drastically. Their faces were filled with disbelief. In just a few exchanges, their chief, who had the strength of a berserker, was killed. Moreover, he was cooperating with another berserker in a 2-on-1 situation. It was simply unbelievable. Some people were so shocked that they forgot that they were fighting with someone and stopped swinging their swords. The Red Wing mercenaries did not hesitate to slash their swords across his neck. How could it be? How could the chief be defeated? One of the two ferocious blood warriors who were besieging Hobbs opened his eyes wide. Their chief, who had the strength of a berserker, died just like that. The other person also looked as if he had seen a ghost. In the face of the siege of their chief and another berserker, not only did he have the advantage, but he also killed their chief in just a few exchanges. Was this person really a berserker and not a barbarian? Crack. On the other side, the old man who had broken free from the ice on his body saw that the black scorpion chief Dryden was in danger. He wanted to help, but it was too late. Your strength. He looked at Gray in surprise, with a trace of fear in his eyes. In the face of the siege of him and another berserker, Gray was actually able to easily kill one of them. If he had not judged that Gray's physical strength was still at the berserker level in the previous battle, he would have thought that Gray was already a barbarian. Who are you? The old man looked at Gray with a trace of fear in his eyes. Don't you think it's too late to ask now? Gray sneered. In front of him, 5 ice wind blades appeared, turning into 5 streaks of green light that swiftly slashed at the old man. Rumble. The old man used his blood beast ability, and a huge earth wall rose in front of him. It turned into a thick rock wall, blocking the ice wind blades. Poochie. Under the ice wind blades, the rock wall was split into pieces like rotten wood. Behind the rock wall, the old man dodged in horror. Although he dodged most of his body, his left arm was not able to dodge. A cold wind blade slashed across his left arm, and a deep wound appeared on his left arm. The wound was so deep that the bone could be seen, and cold ice spread from the wound to his body. Run! Breaking free from the ice on his body, he was in so much pain that cold sweat slid down his forehead. Without hesitation, he fled into the dense forest behind him. This person was definitely not someone he could contend against. Chapter 307. Weren't you full of confidence just now? Gray's eyes were cold as he coldly stared at the old man who was running away. In front of him, 5 emerald green wind blades swiftly slashed out like 5 beams of green light. Puff! The air was torn apart. Everything that came into contact with the blades was sliced cleanly. While fleeing, the old man sensed movement behind him. When he looked back, he was immediately frightened out of his wits. Using his blood fiend ability to its fullest, an earthen wall several meters thick rose from the ground in front of him. Puff! Even though he had used all his strength to create an earthen wall with his blood fiend ability, it was still unable to block the attack. One of the wind blades penetrated the wall and slashed his body. A long bloody wound appeared on his body. His body uncontrollably crashed into a nearby tree, and the tree that required several people to wrap their arms around was broken. Breaking free of the ice on his body, he struggled to get up, only to find that Gray was already in front of him. You can't kill me. Before the old man could finish his words, in front of Gray, 5 ice wind blades had already shot out and slashed across the old man's body one after another. The old man's body was instantly split into 2 halves. There was no blood splattering from the 2 halves of the corpse. The blood had already been frozen before it splashed out. Ridiculous. Only you can kill me. I can't kill you. How can it be such a good thing? Gray sneered. He knew that the old man and the two young men must have a strong background, but he still killed them. They were already here to kill him. Could it be that he could send them off with kind words? Moreover, even if he sent them off with kind words, they would still not let the matter rest. Since that was the case, what was the difference between killing them and not killing them? Leader is dead. How could it be? How could our leader be dead? Run! Seeing that their leader was killed, the Black Scorpion mercenaries panicked. They screamed in panic and fled one after another. Retreat. The two ferocious blood warriors who were besieging Hobbs immediately turned and fled. They split up and fled into the surrounding dense forest. Their leader was already dead. If they did not escape, they would definitely die when the other party was free. When Gray killed the old man, the two young men had already fled into the dense forest. He could only vaguely see the color of their clothes. Swoosh, swoosh. Gray didn't chase after them. Instead, he sent out two ice wind blades in front of him, attacking the two. Puff, puff. Just as the two of them were about to completely disappear into the forest, two icy wind blades slashed across their bodies. As expected, the two of them were split into two halves. Not only the two of them, but even the forest behind them was cut apart. After killing the two mercenaries, Gray did not stop. Instead, he sent wind blades at the fleeing Black Scorpion mercenaries. His body was split into two halves, but there was no blood spurting out. There was only a frozen corpse. Under Gray's ice wind blade, all the Black Scorpion mercenaries were turned into shattered ice. Young Master Gray, Hobbs, Alice, and Haley greeted Gray. They couldn't hide the shock in the depths of their eyes. One person fought two berserkers alone and won. Moreover, the whole process was extremely easy. It was as if a barbarian blood warrior was killing a berserker. They couldn't help but suspect that young Master Gray was already a barbarian blood warrior. But how could such a young barbarian blood warrior be possible? Young Master Gray, could it be that you're already a barbarian blood warrior? Alice asked in shock. No. Gray shook his head slightly and didn't explain further. Due to Gray's unstoppable battle strength, the battle didn't take long from the beginning to the end. The Red Wing didn't have any casualties. Only a dozen or so people were injured. After bandaging their wounds, they continued on their way, heading towards the Corpse Hair Ape, at the edge of Thunder Forest, in the best room of a tavern in a small town. Big brother, something happened. The purple-clothed young man staggered as he pushed open the door and ran into the room, panting heavily. Seeing the purple-clothed young man's flustered face, the blue-clothed young man suddenly had a bad premonition. He looked at the purple-clothed young man and said in a deep voice, "Speak clearly. Someone saw the corpse of the Black Scorpion in Thunder Forest. Even the leader of the Black Scorpion was inside." The purple-clothed young man said anxiously. The blue-clothed young man's expression changed. He stood up and asked with a serious expression, "Is Matthew inside?" "I'm not sure." The person who found it only recognized the leader of the Black Scorpion and a few others. He didn't recognize all of them. The purple-clothed young man said, "Find that mercenary and let him lead the way for us." A few hours later, in the afternoon, the mercenary who found the corpse of the Black Scorpion brought the purple-clothed young man and the blue-clothed young man to the place where Gray fought with the Black Scorpion. Seeing the old man who was split into two halves with a frightened expression, the blue-clothed young man's face suddenly became gloomy. Matthew and another berserker couldn't be taken down. Could it be that there are other berserkers besides that guy? The purple-clothed young man was shocked. "Young master, judging from the fighting traces, the person who killed Matthew and the leader of the Black Scorpion should be the same person. If I'm not mistaken, it should be that noble young man." A subordinate who followed them carefully checked the traces and reported. "I underestimated him," the blue-clothed young man said with a gloomy face. "He actually defeated Mashio and another berserker by himself?" The purple-clothed young man was surprised and looked at the blue-clothed young man. "Big brother, can you do it?" "I can, but it's not easy," the blue-clothed young man said in a deep voice. "Then what should we do now?" "Let the family monitor the Thunder Forest." The blue-clothed young man's eyes flashed coldly. Without stopping, The blue-clothed young man and the purple-clothed young man went out of the forest. "Here, this is yours." A subordinate threw a money bag full of gold coins to the mercenary who led the way. The mercenary reached out and took the money bag. After weighing it, he immediately smiled and said repeatedly, "Thank you, young masters. Thank you, young masters. I won't say anything." Puff. At this moment, the follower pulled out his sword and stabbed it into the mercenary's chest. The mercenary's face froze. When the two young masters asked him to lead the way at a high price, he thought it was an opportunity to make a fortune. He never thought that this opportunity to make a fortune would cost him his life. A dead man is the safest. The subordinate pulled out his sword, wiped it on the mercenary's clothes, and sheathed it. He picked up the money bag, sneered, and followed. 2 days later, Gray and the Red Wing were already deep in the Thunder Forest. Along the way, all the blood fiends they encountered were easily killed by Gray. Even the mad Gray blood fiends were the same. The Red Wing mercenaries were shocked at first, but they soon became numb. There were too many blood fiends. Gray could only pick some that were more valuable and gave the rest to the Red Wing. The Red Wing suddenly made a fortune. Even if the blood fiends were worthless in Gray's eyes, they were still extremely valuable in the eyes of the Red Wing members. "Young Master Gray, the last time we found the corpse hair ape on the hill in front." Alice pointed to a hill in the distance. "Yes." Gray nodded and hurriedly found a high ground in the surrounding area. He looked towards the hills. After so long, he was a little worried that the corpse hair ape had left this place and moved to another place. "It's still here." Soon, his eyes lit up and a trace of joy appeared on his face. On the hill in the distance, there were sparsely grown shrubs. Among the shrubs, more than 10 huge figures could not be concealed and were revealed. 2 of them were extremely huge. At a rough estimate, their bodies were at least 6 meters long. They were crawling among the shrubs and bulging out from the shrubs. Although the other figures were not as big as the 2 huge blood fiends, they were definitely not small either. Even the smallest one was more than 3 meters in size. It hasn't retreated. With so many different types of blood fiends gathered together, it was reasonable to say that there would be endless fighting. However, it was strangely peaceful. This meant that the corpse hair ape was still around. Only this type of blood fiend could keep so many blood fiends in peace. Gray's gaze fell back on the 2 barbarian grade blood fiends. These 2 blood fiends would be his next main opponents. This is a ghost-faced spider. One of them was a huge spider with an extremely ugly and ferocious head. It looked quite frightening. Gray recognized this type of blood fiend. It was a barbarian gray blood fiend, the ghost-faced spider. It could secrete a special kind of extremely durable spider silk. Even a barbarian gray blood fiend would find it difficult to escape if it was bound by this spider silk. Now, there was no need to worry. After being killed, the blood fiend should no longer have the ability to secrete spider silk. This is a tusked boar. The other blood fiend had a large body. Compared to the other blood fiends, it looked quite fat, like a small mountain. The tusked boar was a barbarian gray blood fiend that could transform sound waves into an attack. It belonged to the same category as the barbarian gray blood fiend that fought the copperback dragon. Tusked boar, I wonder if it can unleash the full power of a barbarian grade beast. Gray was a little uncertain. The tusked boar's attack method was to emit sharp, high-frequency sound waves to achieve the purpose of destruction. It was hard to tell if the other party's ability was a physical ability. The introduction of this type of blood fiend in the book only mentioned that it could emit powerful and destructive sound waves. However, there was no detailed record of whether the sound waves were transmitted through the body's organs or through the coordination of the blood force. If it can unleash the full power of a barbarian-grade beast, it will be troublesome. Gray could only rely on himself and the iron-armed barbarian ape. As for the Red Wing, there was no need to count on it. It couldn't even withstand a single berserk grade blood fiend. If the tusked boar could unleash the full power of a ghost-faced spider, which couldn't unleash its full power at about 10 berserk grade blood fiends, it would be a little difficult. He might not be able to handle it. I wonder if I can sneak up on them like last time. Chapter 308. Gray slid down the hill and was welcomed by Hobbs and the rest. "Young Master Gray, are you planning to hunt the corpse hair ape?" After a slight hesitation, Hobbs asked, "Yes, I'm planning to do so." Gray nodded in agreement. This was the reason why he had come this time. Young Master Gray, the two barbarian-level blood fiends controlled by the corpse hair ape, may not be as strong as a real barbarian-level blood fiend, but they are definitely stronger than a berserk-level blood fiend. Even for you, it will be difficult to face two such blood fiends and 10 berserk-level blood fiends alone, Alice said with a frown. Although he had already guessed Gray's purpose, he still couldn't help but feel apprehensive and worried when he heard confirmation from Gray's mouth. "Yes, young Master Gray. Wait until you become a barbarian blood warrior before you hunt." Haley also frowned and suggested. Although she did not know why Gray wanted to hunt the corpse hair ape, it was obvious that Gray's current strength was not enough to hunt the corpse hair ape. "Don't worry, I have my own plans. Even if I can't defeat them, I can still protect myself." Gray shook his head slightly. It was impossible for him to give up. Of course, he would not explain too much to them. After all, this was related to his own secret. After settling the 30 members of the Red Wing in a place far away from the hill where the blood fiends had been killed, Gray stealthily moved toward the hill. He blended into the shadows of the trees, and his body turned into a black phantom as he slowly approached the hill. When he was about 200 meters away, he stopped and circled the hill to observe carefully. 1, 2, 3, 9, 10. Soon, he determined the number of berserk-level blood fiends. Including the corpse hair ape, there were 10 berserk-level blood fiends. Among them, the corpse hair ape was an ape-type blood fiend with a body of white hair that was more than 3 meters long. It was surrounded by many blood fiends. After confirming the positions of the 10 berserk-level blood fiends and the 2 barbarian-level blood fiends, Gray carefully considered and planned out the route with the highest probability of success. He did not act rashly. Only when night fell did he slowly sneak closer to the corpse hair ape. 180 meters, 140 meters, 100 meters. Gray cautiously approached the corpse fur ape and saw that he was getting closer and closer. Rustle. Suddenly, a berserk-level blood fiend crawling on the ground stood up abruptly and rushed toward Gray without hesitation. "Oh no, we've been discovered." Gray's expression immediately changed. The stronger a blood fiend was, the stronger its sense of hearing, smell, and other senses would be. The berserk blood fiend that was pouncing towards him must have an extremely keen sense of smell or hearing. Whoosh! The blood fiend arrived in front of Gray like a gust of wind. It opened its bloody mouth and bit down on Gray. Puff! There was no way to continue hiding. Gray swung his demonic sword and swept the berserk-level blood fiend's neck, sending it flying. Then he clenched his teeth and rushed toward the corpse hair ape instead of retreating. At this time, the corpse hair ape and the blood fiends under its control had already detected the movement here. The barbarian-level ghost-faced spider and several berserk-level blood fiends suddenly rushed toward him. Whoosh! His path was blocked, and he could no longer get closer. Gray stopped running and released the iron-armed barbarian ape to intercept the incoming blood fiends. Around him, an emerald-green tornado appeared. It transformed into icy wind blades and attacked in the direction of the corpse hair ape. The distance was a little far, but it was the closest he could get. Puff! 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 Unsurprisingly, a berserk-level blood fiend that was blocking the way was cut into minced meat. Under the moonlight, numerous icy wind blades reflected a dark green color and attacked the corpse hair ape in unison. At this moment, whoo! A sharp roar suddenly rang out. Then, the emerald green icy wind blades that were attacking the corpse hair ape suddenly shattered, as if they had been hit by an invisible giant hammer. Next to the corpse hair ape, a huge blood fiend raised its head. The terrifying roar that shattered the icy wind blades came from its mouth. Barbarian-level combat power. It's definitely a complete barbarian-level combat power. Gray's expression changed. His worries had come true. The tusked boar had a complete barbarian-level combat power. I can only escape and think of another plan. A blood fiend that could exert a complete barbarian-level combat power. A blood fiend with the body of a barbarian-level blood fiend. and 10 berserk-level blood fiends. He had no chance of winning. Gray jumped onto the back of the iron-armed barbarian ape and commanded it to escape. Behind him, the ghost-faced spider and several berserk-level blood fiends were chasing after him. He looked back and his eyes lit up. He had an idea. The tusked boar and several berserk-level blood fiends stayed beside the corpse-hair ape to protect it. Only the ghost-faced spider and several berserk-level blood fiends were chasing after him. This gave him an opportunity to disperse and destroy the blood fiends controlled by the corpse-hair ape. He commanded the iron-armed barbarian ape to turn around and face the ghost-faced spider. Gray jumped down from the ape and went to meet the berserk-level blood fiends that were chasing after him. There were a total of 3 berserk-level blood fiends chasing after him. One of them had been slashed in the neck by his sword. There was a hideous wound on its neck, but it was not killed. Under normal circumstances, such a serious injury would be serious. Unfortunately, these were not normal circumstances. These were all controlled corpses. As long as their brains were not destroyed, they would still be alive and kicking. Whoosh, 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 whoosh. 5 icy wind blades slashed toward the 3 berserk-level blood fiends. 2 of the berserk-level blood fiends were hit by the icy wind blades and were immediately sent flying. The last berserk-level blood fiend evaded the icy wind blades at an extremely fast speed and continued to pounce on Gray. Puff! The demonic sword in Gray's hand was surrounded by lightning. He slashed at the berserk-level blood fiend, leaving a charred mark on its body and sending it flying. Whoosh! Before the blood fiend landed on the ground, 5 icy wind blades had already slashed out. Whoosh! Under the continuous slashes of the 5 icy wind blades, the blood fiend was instantly chopped into minced meat and could no longer move. At this time, the other 2 blood fiends that were sent flying had already broken free from the ice on their bodies. They got up and pounced. Gray retreated and slashed out 5 icy wind blades. The 2 blood fiends were sent flying again. Whoosh! 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 Under the onslaught of the icy wind blades, the wounds on the 2 berserk-level blood fiends continued to increase. In the end, the 2 blood fiends were turned into minced meat and could no longer get up. On the other side, the iron-armed barbarian ape and the ghost-faced spider were fighting. The iron-armed barbarian ape's huge fist hammered down toward the ghost-faced spider. The ghost-faced spider used its 8 legs to nimbly dodge the iron-armed barbarian ape's huge fist. It circled behind the iron-armed barbarian ape and jumped onto its back. Its 8 sharp claws glinted coldly and pierced into the iron-armed barbarian ape's flesh like blades. At the same time, the ghost-faced spider bit toward the iron-armed barbarian ape. The iron-armed barbarian ape's huge hand grabbed the ghost-faced spider from its back and ruthlessly smashed it into the ground, creating a huge pit. Bang, bang, bang. After all, the iron-armed barbarian ape was a blood fiend that could exert the strength of a barbarian-level blood fiend. The ghost-faced spider, which had lost its ability to spit silk, was no match for the iron-armed barbarian ape. It was unable to inflict too many wounds on the iron-armed barbarian ape's body, but it was constantly getting injured. When Gray finished off the 2 berserk-level blood fiends, he saw the ghost-faced spider that was already injured in many places. The huge ghost-faced spider's body was full of fist prints, and even one of its 8 legs was broken. As long as this ghost-faced spider is dealt with, the rest of the blood fiends will be easy to deal with. Gray's eyes lit up. Numerous emerald wind blades whizzed out and chopped toward the ghost-faced spider's head. The ghost-faced spider dodged, and the wind blades failed to hit the ghost-faced spider's head. Instead, they landed on the ghost-faced spider's body. Huge wounds immediately appeared on the ghost-faced spider's body, and it was frozen by the ice. Although the ghost-faced spider quickly broke free, the brief moment of restraint provided the iron-armed barbarian ape with an opportunity to attack. Under Gray's command, the iron-armed barbarian ape punched the ghost-faced spider's face. The ghost-faced spider struggled to dodge, and the already ferocious ghost-faced spider's face became more and more ferocious. Not good. Suddenly, Gray's expression changed as he cursed inwardly. Woo! The next moment, a strange and sharp sound rang out. The iron-armed barbarian ape, which was attacking the ghost-faced spider, was sent flying backward as if it had been hit by an invisible hammer. The surrounding trees and rocks were all shattered, leaving behind a terrifying trail of destruction. Tusk boar. Not far from the ghost-faced spider, a huge blood fiend with a body of 7 meters appeared. Its body was fat, like a small mountain, and its 2 curved tusks were eerily white. Its whole body was covered with black hair, and it was 2 feet long. When it moved, it looked like a short black mountain. Not only the tusk boar, but there were also 6 blood fiends pouncing toward Ai Hui. Although they were smaller than the tusk boar, they were still huge compared to Gray. Even the smallest one was more than 3 meters tall. Among the blood fiends, there was one blood fiend that was faintly protected. It was an ape-type blood fiend with white hair. It was the corpse hair ape. The corpse hair ape was enraged when it saw the blood fiends being killed one after another and the ghost-faced spider being severely injured. It led all the blood fiends in pursuit. Should I retreat or try again? After a slight hesitation, Gray made a decision. He commanded the iron-armed barbarian ape to get up and fight against the tusked boar, corpse hair ape, and the other blood fiends, while he himself pounced toward the ghost-faced spider. When he was dozens of meters away from the ghost-faced spider, an emerald-green tornado suddenly appeared around him. It turned into numerous icy wind blades, and a chilly wind blew toward the ghost-faced spider. Puff! One of the ghost-faced spider's legs was cut off. Puff! A bloody wound appeared on the ghost-faced spider's abdomen. Puff, puff, puff! Under the numerous icy wind blades, the ghost-faced spider's body was covered with wounds. With a boom, it was sent flying and heavily smashed into the ground in the distance.